The ceremonies, the festivities, and practice are now complete. We're live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where a lone engine sings its song. Its master, strapped in the cockpit, is the great A.J. Foyt, first in line for time trials at Indianapolis.
The track is open for qualification.
Well, you couldn't ask for a better story. A.J. Foyt, who last fall suffered injuries in a terrible accident, when they drew the order of lineup last night, turned out to be the very first in line. And the legions of his fans are here, ready to watch this qualification attempt. Hello and welcome to Time Trials in Indianapolis. I'm Paul Page with Sam Posey and Bobby Unser here in the booth. Jack Arute, Gary Gerald down below. Bobby, this is a historic moment because many think that it is AJ's last time to qualify.
Well, Paul, 30 years ago, Foyt won this race. He stayed.
Just before he rolled out, AJ got the same instructions every driver will hear here today from Chief Stewart.
You come around that second time, your crew has to wave a green flag before you cross the starting line for it to be an official attempt. If they do nothing or wave a yellow flag, you come on in. They wave the green flag, you go ahead and take your 4 laps. And any time before the conclusion of 4 laps, if the crew waves the white yellow flag, it would count as an attempt, but an incomplete attempt, and you have 3 attempts. Now, you want to say that back to me so that I understand it?
First lap. Second
okay.
lap, you better be on it.
Good luck.
Okay. And then
have a good
there
run.
was something, Tom?
Yes.
There was something on the racetrack or something.
In many ways, it's a miracle that AJ even sits in this cockpit at this moment. Last fall at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin in the IndyCar race, his brakes failed. He ran straight off the end of a long straightaway at over 180 miles an hour, carved through the top of an embankment. The car spun around in the air and then came to a rest. AJ was in dirt up to his chest. After a lengthy rescue extrication, AJ was finally taken from the car, loaded onto a helicopter, and transported to a hospital. Since that time, it has been a most lengthy and painful recovery for A.J. Foyt. But he is back where he belongs, in an Indianapolis championship car. And now, acknowledging the green flag, the first qualifier at Indianapolis is perhaps underway, and it is none other than A.J. Foyt. Down the front stretch at 227 miles an hour. His speed falls off just a bit. 215 miles an hour through the first and second turn. Now the speed begins to climb on the long backstretch. If AJ makes it in today, his 34th Indianapolis 500, 226 miles an hour down the backstretch. And coming to the conclusion now of first of 4 laps.
And you will like it. Over 221 miles an hour the time. 40 and 692.
221.174 miles an hour for the first lap. Down the front straight. Again at 229 miles an hour. A.J. Foyt on a qualification run. Before he climbed into the car, he talked in the pit area with our Jack Arute.
AJ, for 34 years, you've made this run down through inspection. Is it any different this last time than it was the first time you did it here at Indianapolis as a rookie?
Well, I hope it's not the last time. I hope we make this run many more times, you know.
But as a driver, it's the last time.
Well, we're looking at that right now, and that's what it's looking like. It will probably be the last time as a driver.
What are your thoughts, though?
I'm not thinking it. I'm just looking at it as another race.
We watched you in the garage area early this morning, and you wanted to be alone. You were off by yourself. You had a lot of thoughts that were going through your mind over 34 years of racing here at the Brickyard.
Well, I've had a lot of thoughts. That's true. And, you know, I was mainly by myself because my stomach was nauseated for some reason this morning. I don't know why, but I took some vitamins this morning. I didn't have breakfast or nothing. That's the reason why.
223 miles an hour yesterday, and that last practice session had you and the team pumped up.
Yeah, it's a little warmer today, and you know, we just got to take what we get and just try what we can.
AJ, good luck.
Thank you, Jack.
A.J.
most of the way
Foyt
down the
averaging
backstretch, setting up for turn number
222
3.
miles an hour on his last lap now.
About 30 years ago, Foyt won this race, and he stayed on top in all sorts of motor racing for a long time. And you know, it's sad in a way to say that there are only 2 drivers in this race, Mario and Gary Bettenhausen, that even remember how good he truly was.
Ironically, the injury has brought back all the fire and focus of his early years. He desperately, you see his son there, AJ desperately wanted to be in this race to accelerate his recovery. He endured months of painful therapy.
You want your radio back? You want your radio?
Well, A.J. Foyt, there's Phil Casey, his chief mechanic, turned his quickest laps ever at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, averaging 222 miles an hour. Here is the Valvoline qualifying summary, 222.4 miles an hour. A.J. Foyt, for the moment at least, has the pole at Indianapolis. The yearly ritual has now begun. Man alone with his machine, searching for the fastest lap at the world's greatest race course. On the last Sunday in May, the IndyCars will fight with this historic roadway for the 75th time. It is a simple rectangular path, 50 feet wide, 2.5 miles long. Today, the historic ritual begins. The goal of every man here is to win, but to win, you must first qualify. Drive fast, then faster still. The Speedway is rimmed with concrete walls that can be unforgiving. A momentary lapse can spell disaster. The risks are tremendous, but the rewards are historic. The Speedway can be hard, even on her favorite sons. These were the remains of Rick Mears' car yesterday. Just past 2 in the afternoon, the 3-time winner hit the wall for the first time in his Indianapolis career. A simple mechanical failure destroyed a $1 million machine in a matter of seconds. But the car's final act was to save its lone passenger. Rick climbed from the wreck, smiled at his rescuers. There was pain in his walk, but his eyes burned with desire. 3 hours later, he was strapped back in the cockpit of a new machine. To Rick, the accident was already history. His focus remained on the race ahead and his dream to go faster still. But it's not just Rick. Kevin Kogan is here with Buick Power. A surprise, but he's a definite possibility for the pole position.
You know, this car may be the best race car I've ever driven here.
For Kevin, there have been other cars, other moments. The dream can become a nightmare.
I was a victim of that, just like Rick was a victim when he hit the wall this afternoon. So it's something that, you know, enters your mind occasionally, but you just got to not think about it.
Rick's teammate, the 1989 winner, Emerson Fittipaldi, climbed to the top of the order with the fastest lap of the week-long practice. The biggest surprise of the week was Buick Power, not just in Kogan's car, but in Gary Bettenhausen's. His father died here chasing his moment in motorsports. Gary races for the family name. Defending champion Arie Luyendyk, just off a win in Phoenix, kept his momentum going. The biggest moment was the return of A.J. Foyt, a living Speedway legend, back after nearly ending his career in a crash last fall. All of the veterans here know to be fast requires absolute precision.
Well, the biggest problem is if you're off just a little, you're not going to drop only a couple of spots. You're going to drop 2-3 rows.
Rick Mears is racing perfection. Within minutes of returning to the track, he was back flat out, turning laps above 226 miles an hour, just as quick as before. But one man's dream can be another's disaster. At the exact moment Rick returned to his team, rookie Mark Dismore was fighting for survival. In a matter of seconds, the Speedway was littered with the evidence that the quest for speed can take a very heavy toll. But then came the biggest surprise of all. Dismore was conscious, injured, but alive, and should be able to race again. As yesterday turned to night, the Speedway had reminded all that the quest for ultimate speed is long, fast, and demanding. But a new day has dawned in Indianapolis. The first day of time trials, the run for the pole, and in many ways, the second most important day of the racing year. And A.J. Foyt is already the first qualifier, the only qualifier, for the moment he's on the pole. Here's Jack Arute.
Well, A.J. Foyt getting the congratulations here in the photography area. A.J. 224.4. That's pretty darn good.
Well, the car had more in it. The car had a lot more in it.
AJ, somebody's crashed badly on the track.
Randy Lewis was starting a qualifying run and was on his warm-ups and then got loose. So now suddenly against the wall, Randy Lewis is okay. He's going to climb out of the car, but you can see that the race car is badly damaged. The safety crews here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway are excellent and right on top of that car. In fact, the safety guy is saying, Randy, stay right there. Let's make sure you're fine.
There hadn't even been a spin all month here at Indianapolis until Rick Mears got in the wall yesterday at 2 o'clock. Suddenly it's as if the dam is broken and incident after incident is occurring here.
Randy Lewis stands up in the seat. There are the marks up to the wall and the debris left by Randy Lewis's impact. He was rolling out as the second qualifier when he got into the wall. Let's go back down to Jackaroo.
AJ, you said before the crash that the car had more in it.
Well, it really does. I think it's a good race setup what we had, and it's just a little bit tight, and I had the crew to raise the gear right before qualifying, and probably, you know, the heat come up pretty quick. But all in all, the cars performed well, and I just didn't do the job probably I should have, because...
Yeah, but you got the job done pretty darn well. It's a solid one, but it seems like it's a lot of things are hitting you. How's the physical side? You said you were nauseated this morning.
Well, I took some vitamin pills on an empty stomach. I knew better, but it was just, it's nothing big.
It's something big. You look pretty upset. It's a getting to you, isn't it?
No, not really.
Paul, I think his eyes tell you differently.
Trying to get all of your people back. Let it out. Just let it out. You deserve it.
Oh, yeah. You done, Jack?
That man is the greatest champion of all time at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He's seen it all, and he recognizes, you can see it in his eyes, all of those miles are coming to an end. A.J. Foyt has completed his qualification run at 222 miles an hour. The second attempt of the day ended here at the edge of the track. Randy Lewis, not injured. He's out of the car. In fact, he'll take the ambulance trip over to the medical center in the center of the track. But that's something that they require at Indianapolis, and it's a very good idea. So the action and time trials will continue in just a moment.
The Indianapolis 500 Time Trials. Brought to you by the Big Taste of Miller Genuine Draft Light. Big Draft Taste comes to light. By Valvoline Motor Oil. People who know use Valvoline. And by Kellogg's. The best to you each morning.
Back live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as Randy Lewis's broken and battered race car is on the hook now, being towed back to the garage area for repairs. Randy Lewis on his way to the hospital, though no serious injuries believed involved. This is Randy Lewis as he headed into the corner.
He just plain lost the rear end, Paul. He got in there, he was in the right groove, everything looked good, but the car was probably set a little bit wrong, the rear end was loose. Watch it right here. There, it just broke away suddenly. That shows you what happens often when the speeds are so great as they are right now.
Of course, when you're going to qualify here, you set the car up as loose as you can for speed.
That's the secret to it, because the car will go faster, but of course, there's what happens when it gets too loose.
So Randy Lewis coming off the fourth turn, getting up against the wall. Take a look at this. This is before the crash. He white-walled the wall there. That's not dissimilar from what Mark Dismore did yesterday, but he came all the way around and got into the inside wall. Lewis was able to keep it straight and move on down the straightaway. Now here's the entry down into one.
He already knew he was loose from what happened down at turn 4.
Aha, here's the point. I think the suspension failed, looking at that. You know, the impact of his hit coming out of turn 4, I'll bet you damaged the suspension, because when you see that right rear tire, it suddenly turns and toes out on him, and that's what triggers that accident for Randy Lewis.
Sam, it's a rule here at the Speedway that if you touch the wall, you're not supposed to run anymore. I think they would have pulled him in anyway.
If they perhaps had seen the severity of that hit, it's possible that Randy himself should have had the wisdom to stop.
So Randy Lewis at the track hospital. We'll give you an update as soon as it comes official. But his against the wall, and that'll slow the time trials here at Indianapolis for the moment. A.J. Foyt, well, Everyone seems to be enjoying his qualification here. He's still giving interviews down on the line. What is a time trial run at Indianapolis? Gary Gerould can take a very close look at how this procedure continues.
Qualifying here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is unlike qualifying at any other IndyCar racing event. The normal procedure at any other oval calls for a driver to take 2 consecutive laps. The faster of the 2 laps is his official qualifying time. Here at the Speedway, of course, you run 4 consecutive laps, and it's the total time for those 4 laps that becomes your official time. Now, also here at the Speedway, qualifying is held over 4 days, and the fastest 33, regardless of what day they qualify, constitute the field. The pole goes to the fastest qualifier of the first day, or the fastest qualifier once everybody has taken a trip through the original qualifying line, whichever comes last. The idea being that should rain disrupt the first day, say after only a handful of cars had qualified, everybody in that original line gets a shot at the pole. Each car can make 3 qualifying attempts, but once you run 4 laps, 10 miles, and get an official time, that car cannot be requalified. If a driver is bumped, however, he can move to another car and try to qualify that machine. Once you have 33 cars in the field, the slowest in the provisional lineup is on the bubble, and he can be knocked out of the field by a faster qualifier.
Well, there have been a number of conversations of how they might change qualifying at Indianapolis, but so far no one's come up with a system that anyone likes any better than that. Now let's go back and take a look at this Randy Lewis situation, courtesy of the Telex Entertainment Group, who has provided these angles to us. And I think, Sam, that you're right on the money, that when he grazed the wall coming off of 4, that something broke, but it didn't manifest itself till he got down to the end of the straightaway.
Yeah, there's nothing worse for a race driver than driving a car that he fears is damaged. And under no circumstances, except maybe the pressure of qualifying here at Indianapolis, would you continue. But Randy knew what was at stake. He's qualified well here before. He's had his better moments as a race driver here at the Speedway. He didn't want to give up this moment.
Well, you could see as Randy went into the number 1 turn, the right rear wheel, if you looked at it in that last play that we just had, toes out or points towards the outside of the racetrack. That means that one of the radius rods broke.
All right, so Randy Lewis has slowed the action for the moment. Gary Bettenhausen is one of the stories everyone is watching here today, with Buick Power a very good chance to sit on the pole. Here's Gary Gerould.
He sits here in the cockpit, waiting very patiently under what is becoming an increasingly hot Indiana sun. Gary Bettenhausen, you've been through this procedure so many times, but now with this delay, how does it affect you, and do the nerves come into play anymore?
No, not really. It's not bothering me a bit. Just give me a little time to relax.
Is this the best opportunity that you've had at Indianapolis in how many years?
Well, I think it's probably my best opportunity ever, even when I drove for Roger Penske in 72, 3, and 4. I think this car is actually more competitive than the car I had then.
What makes this car more competitive?
Well, I think it's a combination of Buick and Lola working together and building this particular chassis around the engine instead of just taking a Buick and dropping it in a car that already existed for a Chevrolet or for a Cosworth. And because the engine is a little bit heavier than the Chevrolets, and you know, when you're running this fast, it doesn't take much to slow you down 3-4 miles an hour.
We wish you well. Gary Bettenhausen soon to be out for a qualifying attempt. Paul?
And of course, sometimes those are the longest waits, when you're not really ready to roll out at the time you originally planned. Gary Bettenhausen and the rest are caught with that problem. We'll be back with more of the first day of time trials.
Former world and Olympic champions meet in the first ever Pro Gymnastics Championships, plus the Pimlico Special. It's all live today on ABC's Wide World of Sports.
Well, we're still on hold at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the first day of time trials. The run for the pole for the Indianapolis 500-mile race in 2 weeks. The reason for the hold? Well, Randy Lewis, who last year qualified 12th into this 500 field, was beginning to warm up for his qualification run when this happened, Sam Posey.
Well, look at the right rear tire. That already, as he goes down the back straight, is starting to wobble. Now, as he goes into the turn, that tire, of course, is heavily loaded. That is the cornering tire, and you can see at this point it is already towing out, as we would call it, against the wall. At this point, Randy certainly knows he's in trouble, and in fact, he turns the car very smartly down to the inside of the track to try to minimize the angle which he will eventually hit the wall at. So it was a mechanical error. He made a good move in the cockpit once he knew the trouble that he was in.
And the crews now want to make sure that all debris from that accident are off the racetrack. The quick flash of fire, by the way, is the oil in the turbocharger lines burning away, and they burn very quickly. Now, this is the warm-up, of course, for the Indianapolis 500. So far this year, there have been 3 races in the PPG IndyCar World Series. Let's go back and take a look at the season thus far. As the 33 rolled toward Dwayne Sweeney's green flag, few would have guessed how many records were ready to fall. Rick Mears had the pole, but typically let the lead go to his teammate, 1989 winner Emerson Fittipaldi. Once granted the lead, he drove away from the rest. Others struggled. Few were able to maintain the pace. Danny Sullivan, when a wheel bearing let go, slammed into the wall. It would not be the last incident of the day. A similar problem would send Pancho Carter up against the wall in turn number 4. And another failed bearing found Michael Andretti heading for the pits, his right rear wheel on fire. Valiantly, the crew went to work on the car, and after a number of laps in the pits, were able to repair the damage and send Michael back into the fight. Emerson Fittipaldi headed for the pits, now suffering a plague many of the teams had felt. Throughout the torrid run, he had managed to blister his tires. But blistering tires were a problem now faced by almost every competitor in the race. The Penske team made constant changes on Fittipaldi's and Rick Mears' car, trying to catch a changing track. It was an objective that they would never find. Bobby Rahal now had the lead of the race, but he was being chased by the Flying Dutchman, Arie Luyendyk. Their fight took the race average to a record pace. Arie had never won an IndyCar race and now saw the biggest prize of all within his grasp. He ducked under Rahal and took the lead. All during the month-long practice, his mount had been consistently strong and reliable. Then, without a look back, he continued on toward the checkered flag. It was a Sunday afternoon drive to a record $1 million prize and a race record shattering pace of 185.981 miles an hour. Not bad at all for a first ever win. Arie Luyendyk, the winner of the 1990 Indianapolis 500-mile sweepstakes. That, of course, the running of last year's 500. In line to qualifying, coming up, Jeff Brabham, Gary Bettenhausen, Hiro Mashusta, Bernard Jourdain, Danny Sullivan should be up shortly. ABC Sports coverage of the Indianapolis 500 time trials will return after this message and a word from our ABC station. It's a magnificent crowd at Indianapolis. The yellow light still burns while they continue to pick up debris from Randy Lewis's accident. Should be a great day, not threatened with rain at all, though. IndyCar drivers share many interests with naval aviation. After the Phoenix race, Danny Sullivan, Scott Pruitt, and Emerson Fittipaldi and I traveled to visit with those serving in the aftermath of Operation Desert Storm. First stop, Sigonella Naval Air Station in the shadow of Mount Etna in southeastern Sicily. The SIG, as they call it, is a maintenance facility servicing the aircraft power plants that keep the Navy in the air. For the drivers, it was like talking to their own racing crews. The language is much the same. As are the goals. It's simple, maximum performance. It was hard to tell who was enjoying it more, the Navy or the IndyCar drivers. Here, too, they climbed into the largest helicopter in the free world and met crews fresh from the war. Then a flight across the Mediterranean Sea to the coast of Turkey to find CVN-71, the nuclear-powered carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt. The TR has adopted the IndyCar drivers. Last year, it was from these then peaceful decks that Rick Mears was catapulted skyward. Now, The flight deck bristles with firepower as the ship continues to protect American troops still in contact. Danny Sullivan and Scott Pruitt were at home, and the crew were glad that there was still someone who would come and visit and care. Still, it was hard to tell who was whose hero. Some TR crew member will be at Indianapolis for the running of the 500. And this year, they'll find they have some special new friends.
And those armed servicemen will be cheering for one of the people they met up close and personal, Danny Sullivan. But Danny, this has not been a good week for the Alfa Romeo team. 6 engines in 7 days.
Yeah, we haven't had the best of luck. We're not pulling the straightaway speed that they saw in the dyno over in Italy, so we're trying to improve on that. Unfortunately, we're having to turn it real tight, and the valves aren't enjoying that too much.
A year ago, this man was a contender for the pole position with Team Penske. Then you elected to go to a research and development type team. Is that frustrating for you as a driver?
Sure, I think particularly here at the Speedway, because you're out here every day and everybody's posting those big speeds and you're not anywhere near it. It's frustrating, but you know, we knew what we were doing when we went into it, so we just got to keep hoping for the best. The car's working real good. We just got to get some straightaway speed.
Would think that it also changes what you look for in terms of qualifying speed today. What's the magic number for you and the Alfa Romeo team?
Well, we're running around here flat the whole way around anyway, so we're just going to put it in the show and not worry about it. We should be able to run 217 to maybe 220 if we get lucky someplace in that bracket and just put it in and work on our race setup next week.
Before we went on the air, Paul, and we were watching that piece about the carrier, you said that was the most fun you've had probably in 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, it was just an unbelievable experience. One, you know, it's a pity more people can't experience it, but just to see those men and women out there and see what they do for us, it was just fantastic, as Paul knows, but an unbelievable experience.
Well, Danny, good luck to you today, but obviously he's already admitted to us that he doesn't have a whale of a chance of getting the pole position, just wants to put the car in the field.
So Danny Sullivan, with the veteran's knowledge of the Indianapolis 500, waits for his attempt at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Some repairs still being made to the fence after Randy Lewis's accident. That's causing a further delay, but there's a whole line of qualifiers ready to go at Indianapolis. Michael and Mario Andretti wait. Mario is 8th down on the line. Michael right behind, but talk about tension. The delay here eats at them. So the crews seem to have now finished their work on the fence in the first turn, and the pace car has made a final inspection. Now, we mentioned a little while ago about the terrible accident yesterday involving Mark Dismore, who makes his home not far from here in Greenfield, Indiana, and here it was. Dismore touched the wall with the right rear coming off of the 4th turn. Then the car backed into the inside wall, literally punched a hole in the wall, then came off and into the pit barrier head on. Then the car disintegrated.
You can watch, Paul. He gets right out. He loses the rear end. Now he's hitting in a very bad direction, right towards the wall, 90 degrees. Car turns, punched a big gaping hole in the wall right there. Glances right over in the worst place on the track. The end of the pit wall, the entrance wall going into the pits. Worst place in the world you could hit a wall here at Indianapolis. And that's on the right-hand side. That's what's left of the tub. That's where Mark is. And, of course, that part stayed together fairly good.
Now, it took some time to rescue him from the car. He was taken to Methodist Hospital here locally. And now Jack Arute has an update on Mark Dismore's condition.
Paul, and the update is very positive. He's just completed 6 hours of surgery by Dr. Terry Trammell on his extremities. That would be his arms and his legs. He is in the recovery room, but he is listed in good condition, and that is certainly very, very good news.
Not only good, but surprising. The report was he never lost consciousness at any time during that. Here is Jeff Brabham, who now rolls out on his warm-up lap, ready to qualify at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, already coming down the backstretch as fast as he can and building up speed. The great IMSA champion who's never won an IndyCar race.
And Paul, that's a different car. We're used to hearing Lola and Penske's here. That's an True Sports car, and it's got a Judd engine in it. They haven't been having an awful lot of luck with the horsepower out of that. It's been way down on straightaway speed.
The sister car, which is driven by Scott Pruitt, has gone through 4 engines in the last 4 days, blown 4 of those Judd engines. So this team is not one that is very confident at this point.
Let's go down to Jack Arute.
Paul, the first major change we've heard in qualifying procedures, actually for one team, Michael Andretti is going to qualify his T car. It seems they found 3 miles per hour in practice this morning, and they can't explain why, so they've elected to go with the T car.
Well, there's a big surprise out of the Newman Haas stable as we watch Jeff Brabham. In his first appearance in an IndyCar this year, of course, he has a long string of victories in the IMSA series and the GT cars.
You know, these days they have onboard computers which tell you when you get back to the pits what your throttle opening was. Now, everybody talks about driving around this place flat out, but you see him, he comes in, no speed.
He's not going to try it.
Paul, I can listen to that engine as it's running. He's only got 7 cylinders. Why he stayed out so long, I don't know, but the engine is bad, and obviously he's pulled in to tell him.
Maybe he thought he would clear up, but it didn't. Now, since that is a car-induced problem, if in fact that's what it is, and not a situation developing on the racetrack, his qualification attempt is complete at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he will have to move all the way to the back of the line.
That's for the going for the pole. He has to go to the back of the line for that, but he still has 2 more chances later on, but no more pole chances for him.
So Gary Bettenhausen sits in his cockpit, and he waits. He should be the next out. And in the lineup behind Gary, Hiro Matsushita.
Like A.J. Foyt, Gary goes way back here, back to 1966. He's going to be 50 years old at the end of this year. A.J., of course, 56. But these are men who remember the Speedway from an entirely different era. 2 men that really love racing and have loved it deeply for years. Of course, A.J. has had a lot of luck through his career. Gary has had very little. He was terribly injured in a sprint car accident. He almost won this race in 1972, but it broke down.
Gary Bettenhausen, of course, the incredible Bettenhausen name with a long history at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, now living the legacy of his father. Here is Sam Posey.
In the 1950s, the Indianapolis 500 was contested by a generation of drivers to whom courage meant more than technique. Races were won not so much by technology as by sheer force of personality. It was a time when post-war America looked for heroes and found some of them behind the wheel. One such man was Tony Bettenhausen. Of German descent, he had 4 children, a daughter and 3 sons, the oldest of which, Gary, was a teenager when his father was in his prime. Gary remembers his dad.
He was the type of guy that after he'd win a race, or even if he blew up on the first lap, he would sit there until there was not a fan that didn't want it. I mean, until everybody was gone. If there was somebody that wanted his autograph, he'd stay until dark. And I think that's why he was so popular.
May 1961. In his 13 starts, Tony had often led the 500, but had never won. At the age of 44, he knew he didn't have many chances left, and winning Indy had become an obsession.
He called me at noon, and how he had some brake shoes being worked on for one of the tractors or the combine or something, and he asked me to call and see if they were ready. That was noon, and 10 minutes after 2, Jack Beckley called me, and he was gone.
He had been killed, not in his own car, but testing a car for a friend.
He did not succeed at winning Indy, and he left that legacy to his children to hopefully do what he wasn't able to do. And I remember when I first started it, we all had it in our mind that we'd win the first one for Tony, and then the second ones would be for ourselves. So it was just something that we wanted to do for him.
Tony's death was to be a harbinger of frustration and misfortune. Gary would lead the 500, be on his way to victory and the fulfillment of his father's dream when just 17 laps from the end, his car coasted to a stop. Then Merle crashed at Michigan. His right arm, trapped between the car and the wall, was torn off. Then this, Syracuse, New York, a sprint car crash in which Gary's left arm was paralyzed.
For about, I'd say the first 3 days after the accident, I laid in the hospital, and I thought there's got to be a better way to make a living. You know, what does this family have to do to realize that there's a better way than automobile racing?
Year after year, Gary and his brother Tony came back to Indy, always with the obsession, never with the tools to win. They were fighting a tide of technology and big money. The values their father stood for no longer won races. Family pride became mixed with bitterness and frustration.
The most important thing in my dad's life was winning Indianapolis. And he never did, and he ended up dying there. And it went on to me, and it's my most important thing in my life. I think without a doubt we've given too much, and it's almost too late to quit now. I mean, you got to keep going for what we've been trying to do for so many years. And we're running out of time. I realize that I'm in the twilight of my career. There's Tony, and that's it. Tony doesn't have any boys. My two boys will never drive. So we're running out of time.
And the Bettenhausen frustrations at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway continue. Gary Bettenhausen with probably his best shot, admittedly he said his best shot at winning the pole position for the Indianapolis 500, has pulled in the middle of his qualifying attempt. He will not have a shot at the pole. I asked Gary what the problem was, and this is what we're not sure about. He said, listen, you'll have to ask Darrell Soppe, the crew chief. I asked Darrell Soppe what the problem was. He said, ask Gary Bettenhausen. Neither men want to talk, and John Menard, the car owner, went away shaking his head, said, they don't tell me anything. Let's check in now to the hospital with some good news is Gary Gerould.
Well, it's another disappointed driver, Jack, and he's back from the hospital now in his garage area in Gasoline Alley, Randy Lewis, and this is not the way anyone wants their first qualifying day to go at Indianapolis. Can you tell us what happened with the car?
Well, I can only guess a little bit, but it's probably guessed pretty close. I was starting out my first lap, of course, and you want to come flat out of 4, and I was a little high in the groove, but I thought it would be okay, and I touched the wall just a little bit coming out of 4, and I debated whether to call it off, but the car felt fine going down the straight, so I thought, well, I gave it a shot, and of course it was a wrong thing to do because as I turned into 1 just immediately, whatever I had touched, either I lost a tire because of that or a suspension piece failed probably because of the tap up in turn 4. In fact, for sure because of that. So
you've been medically cleared to drive. Do you have plans to get into another car? Do you have a car available?
I'm sure I'll be back out there. We'll either fix this one or we have a backup car.
Important things. You're all right. We're pleased with that. Thanks for chatting with us.
Thank you very much.
Let's go back up to Paul Page.
Good to see Randy Lewis's pleasant smile there. This is Bernard Jourdain. Now, we need to point out a couple of things. Jourdain is just ready to take the green flag on his qualification attempt. This is one of A.J. Foyt's cars. Now, Gary Bettenhausen still has a chance for the pole if everybody that has lined up for the pole today makes an attempt or waves off or doesn't try, and there's still time between now and 6 o'clock. He can still make it out. Hiro Mashusta went out on the course, took a lap around and pulled it in, and that brought out Bernard Jourdain.
Well, this is the car that Foyt drove last year here at the race. Looks like he's coming in right now. He hasn't been getting up to a lot of speed, but that is one of the Buick engines from this year.
And this has been converted over from a Chevrolet to a Buick power plant. It's the same car that he raced at Long Beach, but he is not going to attempt a qualification now. Bernard Jourdain becomes the 3rd man in a row to pull his car off the race course and not attempt to qualify at Indianapolis. But coming up next will be this man, Danny Sullivan.
Tomorrow on ABC Sports, the World League playoff races heat up as the Birmingham Fire takes on the Frankfurt Galaxy. Then the Indianapolis 500 time trials continue. And later it's back to Europe for Formula One's premier event, the Grand Prix of Monaco. It's all tomorrow on ABC Sports.
Danny Sullivan at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway just now takes the green flag and begins a 4-lap, 10-mile qualification attempt. This is a 1991 Lola, brand new car, powered by an Alfa Romeo racing engine.
Now, Paul, this Alfa engine is one that is supposedly a copy of a Chevrolet. More than a year ago, Pat Patrick sent a brand new Chevrolet engine over to Alfa. They supposedly have copied the engine. They obviously aren't getting the same horsepower, though.
Danny Sullivan, former winner of the Indianapolis 500 from 1985, had some bad luck here a couple of years ago when he got into the wall in turn 4 during the practice.
He has twice started from the middle of the front row in qualifying, but I suspect that at the end of today, he will be lucky to be starting from the middle of the pack.
Danny Sullivan completes his first lap at 217.949 miles an hour. I wonder if he'll be satisfied with that, Bobby.
Yes, he will be, Paul, because ironically, that's good compared to what they've been running most of the week in practice. They've been running normally about 214 to 250, so that's almost 218 there.
That's a bottom third of the field kind of speed, though. The wind has freshened from the southeast. I doubt if it's affecting him.
This is the 20T car. The T is for test or backup car, but ironically, this car has been faster at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. His quickest lap in practice in this machine at 220 miles an hour, but he's not approaching that now. Now, remember that last year, this car was handled by Roberto Guerrero. He is not in the car now, obviously. Danny Sullivan is. There is no other team car here, and Roberto Guerrero is a spectator. He's with Jack Arute.
And Roberto, it's got to be frustrating. You're out of the ride, and you don't have a ride for the Indianapolis 500. First time you've been unemployed in quite some time.
It's the first time since I started my career, actually, and I don't really enjoy coming to the track, especially the Speedway. You know, qualifying day, it's hard for me, and things don't look very good right now, so I just have to try and keep a smile and just haven't given up completely, but it doesn't look too good right now.
But off camera, a lot of times he's been very embittered by what happened to him, Paul.
Roberto Guerrero, a spectator, watching the car that he handled so well last year, but still has a fine smile. Danny Sullivan has completed 3 of his qualification laps, and is running an average speed of 218.2 miles an hour, 252. Only one man has qualified thus far today. That, of course, is A.J. Foyt. This is the 7th presentation at the line as Danny Sullivan comes toward the checkered flag to complete a qualification run in Indianapolis.
Now remember, Paul, you talked about the blown some engines on the Alfa. Again, the reason for this is in order to get speed, they have to turn the engine tighter, more RPM.
Quicker for
and of course, this is what makes the power, is what the rear tires actually see.
Set to go out. Jim Crawford.
Danny Sullivan completed the final lap at 218.616 miles an hour. His average speed for the 4 laps, 218.343 miles an hour. So Danny Sullivan is the 2nd man to qualify for the 75th running of the Indianapolis 500. Now, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a giant facility. Some refer to it as the Tabernacle of Racing. Let's take a look at this great race course. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is also the world's largest stadium with over 300,000 permanent seats. The track itself is 2.5 miles around. The straightaways are 50 feet wide, 60 in the turns, with a mere 9 degrees of banking. The pits lie on the inside of the front or the home stretch. The 4 turns are exactly the same, and each 1/4 mile long. Connecting the turns are the short chutes at the north and south end of the track, 1/8 mile long. The 2 straightaways are each 5/8 mile. The total, 2.5 miles, should be driven in under 44 seconds. A qualifying run here, Bobby Unser, is on the ragged edge.
Well, Paul, the lap begins right here on the front straightaway. Now, notice as he goes into the turn, how easy he moves the steering wheel. Now, that's wide open around here. There is no lifting and no braking when you're qualifying. How fast you come off this turn, 2 right there, makes the difference on the straightaway speed. This engine will be turning 12,400 RPM, 230 miles an hour. And look at this, wide open into turn 3. Down and right back out. The driver has to keep his head up really straight and look way far ahead, because that's where he's going to be in just about 1/2 second. Often real close to the wall, sometimes no more than 1 foot. Now, this is the front straightaway again. It looks like a dead-end alley down there.
And on the track now, that bright green car belongs to Jim Crawford. It's the 26T car, again a backup car. It's seen speeds at 225.6 miles an hour thus far during the practice.
And that placed it 7th fastest for the month of May before today. Surprisingly, even 225 was a disappointment to this team because all winter, word had leaked out, rumors had leaked out about the power of this Buick engine, and there was speculation this car might go 230 miles an hour here. It'll be interesting to see what the back straight speed, top speed, is only 226. That compares with A.J. Foyt's top speed on the back straight of 228 and Danny Sullivan's of 221. So the Buick is somewhere between the Chevy and the Alfa Romeo.
Lap number 1 complete.
40.857 on the time, 220.280 miles an hour, first lap.
Cruising the backstretch at 226 miles an hour. Then when he came down the front stretch at 227.8 miles an hour. This car owned by drag racer Kenny Bernstein.
Now these big engines, Paul, probably do about 75 horsepower more than the Chevrolets. They only turn about 9,400 RPM today, as opposed to Chevrolet turn 12,400 RPM. Big difference.
So Jim Crawford has completed 2 laps, working lap number 3. He's more than halfway through.
Speed 220.826 miles an hour.
Jim Crawford will only do 1 race this year. He only did 1 race last year, this race. So it's a major disappointment to him that things are not going better than they are right now.
And Sam, I just wanted to mention that he's going to have to go 230 miles an hour to equal the Chevrolets. That's about the speed they do when they do about 226 miles an hour. So it's got to be a little bit disappointing to Jim Crawford.
The back straightaway speed fell off to 224.2 miles an hour. That's a 3-mile-an-hour deficit from the previous lap.
About 2 miles an hour.
And he has a following wind down that straight. Things are not right aboard this car. Not 100%.
18.856. Will he take the final checkered flag? We await the decision. John Tuck.
And Jim Crawford is averaging 219.9 miles an hour on his final lap.
It's obvious that he has a slight handling problem, and he'll probably tell us that when he gets in, Paul, because the engine sounds really good.
Jim Crawford has been suffering problems throughout the month. They're going to take the run, though. It looks like the average will come up above 219 miles an hour for Jim Crawford. The last lap, though, at a disappointing 215.8 miles an hour. But it's a car they have been struggling with throughout the entire month of May, and I think they're just happy to be in to the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Still, Jim Crawford is the 2nd quickest qualifier, A.J. Foyt, of course, being the quickest. Here's the Valvoline qualifying summary for Jim Crawford, who is now in the race. We have 3 cars qualifying. ABC Sports coverage of the Indianapolis 500 time trials will return right after this message and a word from our ABC station.
We're here trackside with Jim Crawford, who just completed his run. A little bit disappointing at 218.
Yeah, very disappointing.
You ran so much quicker in practice. What happened?
I don't really know. We've had trouble with the wastegates and the boost, and it fluctuates over 3, 4, 5 inches of boost, which is a lot of power, and we don't know why. And you're right there. It'll go fast 1 minute and slow the next. So we've got a problem we're going to have to solve for race day.
Paul, immediately when they came down here, the first thing that the computer technicians did was go to this jack right here. And they downloaded that information that Jim Crawford is talking about. They put it on their computer to check that wastegate and also the boost pressure, get it very accurate. They'll go back to the garage and try and figure this one out.
Well, the good news is that they are in the field as Scott Goodyear heads out. And I think that they just wanted to be safely in, don't you, Bobby Unser, so they had plenty of time to try and work with the car.
Yes, Paul, that's the main thing right now is to get in. With all the accidents we saw earlier, that was good planning, I think.
Scott Goodyear, the young Canadian, a sophomore here at Indianapolis on a qualification run. To this point, he is averaging 216.7 miles an hour. And if he completes the run at that average, then he will qualify as the 4th fastest. He'll also just be the 4th qualifier.
Now that's another one of the Judd engines that Scott is driving. And again, he's had a few problems braking during the last week. Definitely some problem with straightaway speed. You can tell by the lap times. He's really been getting through the turns good.
He is one of a group of young drivers in waiting, you might call them. Young men waiting for a good ride to open up as one of the established stars retires. He's 31, as Paul said, a Canadian, I think, with tremendous promise.
And Scott Goodyear takes the checkered flag, completing a 4-lap qualification run in time trials in Indianapolis. And he will start on the inside of the second row if the field were to line up at this moment. His average speed, 216.751 miles an hour. That's for Scott Goodyear.
And every lap, that was 4 laps, 216, Paul.
So there's the 4 laps of Scott Goodyear. Coming up next on ABC's Pro Bowlers Tour, high rollers take aim at $125,000 in the Fresno Open. And later today at 4:30, 3:30 Central, Wide World of Sports presents former world and Olympic champions as they go for the gold at the World Professional Gymnastics Championship. Plus, the American Championship Racing Series continues with the Pimlico Special. That's live, all coming up here on ABC later this afternoon. But for the time being, it's qualifying at Indianapolis, and talk about a veteran. Mario Andretti is strapped in the cockpit and ready to go.
Mario was 4th fastest qualifier in '88. 5th in '89, 6th in '90. He's hoping to turn that trend around.
Let's go down to Gary Gerald.
Well, Paul, Mario sits in the car. They had the engine fired. We thought he was ready to roll out. The yellow light has remained on. They have shut the engine down. We need to find out what has happened around the course and why we have a delay. And Mario just waits patiently, as he has done for so many, many years at this famed 2.5-mile oval. Paul?
Well, Gary, they're taking a look at the racing service. Apparently, something was reported on the track. And, of course, Indianapolis is well known for making sure that this is a pristine surface for racing whenever they race or whenever they qualify. I mentioned earlier there have been thus far 3 races this year in the PPG IndyCar World Series. Indianapolis will become the 4th. So far, it's been a fairly interesting season. Let's take a look. The 1991 PPG IndyCar World Series opened in Surfers Paradise, Australia, the first time for kart outside North America. Michael Andretti took the early lead and began a battle with Al Unser Jr. in a replay of last year's championship fight. All along the beachside street circuit and before a giant crowd, the two waged their battle. And then at the chicane, Al jumped a curb and slammed into the wall. Mario Andretti tried to avoid, but struck Al's car. It ended Eddie Cheever's day as well. Now Rick Mears put up a fight with Michael Andretti and got past into the lead. Now it began to look as if it was Rick's race, as he began to outdistance the competition. But soon he became entangled in traffic and was blinded by a setting sun. The combination of the two were too much even for this champion. Mears drove off the end of an escape road as Randy Lewis caught the barrier. The race now fell to young John Andretti. It would be his first IndyCar win and a first checkered flag for the Jim Hall VDS team. Bobby Rahal would come home in 2nd place. A month later in the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, Michael again had the pole and led the field toward the first turn. Michael would lead the entire first lap and drove viciously to keep away from a charging Al Unser Jr. But by the end of the first lap, Little Al took the lead of the race. But the fight was not over as Michael Andretti stayed right at his heels, followed closely by Emerson Fittipaldi. In the meantime, Eddie Cheever was carving his way up through the field. A 10-year veteran of the Formula One, he was at home on the Long Beach Street course, now driving in his sophomore year for the Chip Ganassi racing team. A battle began for 2nd place between Emerson Fittipaldi and Michael Andretti as Al Unser Jr. drove away from the competition. On the final pit stops, Michael Andretti roared out of the pits trying to take 2nd place. Emerson Fittipaldi pulled out in front of him and the two tangled. It was a spectacular accident, but fortunately neither driver was injured, though they were both out of competition. And Al Unser Jr. took his 4th straight win in the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. A week later at the Valvoline 200 on the Phoenix Mile, it was Rick Mears with the pole. But Michael Andretti took the early lead, chased by Ray Hall, Sullivan, and Mario Andretti. Mears began to experience handling problems and fell steadily backwards. The racing was stupendous, 2 and 3 abreast, until Scott Goodyear caught the wall in traffic. As most headed for the pits, Lyondike stayed out and took the lead. Later, as Guido Dacco caught the wall, Arie Lyondike was able to see the accident. It gave him just enough room to turn down to the pits. Dacco was uninjured, and Lyondike was able to maintain the lead. A furious battle developed behind Lyondike for second place between Fittipaldi, Rahal, and Michael Andretti. Michael used an unconventional outside line to continue his race. As Fittipaldi and Rahal battled, with Michael watching from a seat just behind, Lyondike drove away from the rest of the field. On the last lap, the yellow flag came out because of Danny Sullivan's blown engine, and Arie Lyondike coasted toward the checkered flag, winning his second IndyCar race. Again, Bobby Rahal came in second place. And because of those consistent second-place finishes, Bobby Rahal currently leads the points fight. The eyes of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway are on this man, Mario Andretti. He's just completed his first lap in a qualification attempt.
Speed report, and it's over 221.5 miles an hour.
Mario first qualified for this race back in 1965 at 158 miles an hour. His first lap makes him almost 63 miles an hour faster today than he was then.
Now, if you watch Mario, Paul, as he goes into the turns, he runs a lot lower than the other guy. Sometimes he runs almost down to the grass. Or, in other words, he uses more of the racetrack than most of the drivers. But he's one of the best that they've ever had here.
Mario Andretti completes lap number 2. To this point, he's averaged 221.5 miles an hour, but he picks the average to 221.699 miles an hour with another lap at 221.8. Down in the pits, he's being watched by his son, Michael Andretti, and Gary Gerald is there.
Reaction from the first 2 laps of watching your dad and the times at over 221.
A little disappointed. You know, we were hoping for a little more, so you know, I don't have a whole lot to look forward to right now.
Is your car set up the same way as your father's?
Pretty similar, yeah, unfortunately.
And you're anxious? You say unfortunately.
Well, it's not a very quick time right now, so we were hoping to be in the high 222, so either a track slow down or something, I don't know.
Let's catch this 3rd lap time now from Paul.
Mario Andretti working his last lap. To this point,
6'4", speed 221.872.
221.872 for his 3rd lap. His average to this point, 221.7. He could be driving for the second fastest qualifying run of the day.
Michael, 5 cars away now from his run. All during practice was just half a mile an hour faster than Mario. So at the best, we're going to see him in the 222 range.
Mario Andretti takes the checkered flag. 10 laps, 10 miles, 4-lap qualification run complete. And Mario Andretti is into the 75th running of the 500.
Best over the 222-mile-an-hour mark. Make it 40.50.
222.003 miles an hour for the last lap. He averages 221.818 miles an hour. And for the moment, he is alongside A.J. Foyt in the center of the front row. We'll be back with more. The first day of time trials, the run for the pole.
The Indianapolis 500 Time Trials. Brought to you by Goodyear, the unanimous choice of every single team trying to qualify for the Indianapolis 500. By Old Spice Deodorant, because prevention is the ultimate form of protection. Count on it. And by Kellogg's, the best to you each morning.
On the Speedway now, Dean Hall, as he is on the first lap of his qualification attempt.
1 lap complete in this attempt for Dean Hall.
Good straightaway speeds down the back at 213. I say good because so far this month his best practice speed has only been at 215 miles an hour. 205.343 miles an hour for the first lap of Dean Hall.
Dean Hall used to make his living as a speed skier, which involved, and I think, I don't know if we're seeing him slow down here, he would go to remote mountains and ski down them at up to 120 miles an hour. Faster than he's going right now, Paul.
Well down below the line, and Dean Hall becomes another to wave off his first qualification attempt. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Paul, I think we finally have broken the silence between Gary Bettenhausen, Darrell Sapia's crew chief, and John Menard. This is the car that they tried to qualify. This is the area on the top of the manifold of the Buick engine where the pop-off valve is placed. They have pulled that pop-off valve off. They have taken it back to replace it with another pop-off valve. See this hose right here? That's attached beneath the pop-off valve so that a driver can run that hose back up to his helmet and he can adjust the boost. That's the turbo pressure inside the manifold of the engine, so he can get the optimum allowed. In the case of the Buick, it's 55 inches of boost. All that Gary Bettenhausen could get during his warm-up runs was 51 inches of boost. That's why he pulled in. Now, here's the other part to the story, however. They changed valves this morning after the practice session.
Now, that has to be a very disappointed team, Gary Bettenhausen, but he still has an opportunity if they put the car back in line and get it teched and then out to the track before the day, and it seems like there's going to be more than enough opportunity. On the track, the number 8 car, it belongs to Eddie Cheever out of Chip Ganassi Racing. Eddie, of course, for 10 years was in the Formula One and now is enjoying his time in the IndyCars. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
Mario Andretti, the veteran of so many years, I know you're not happy with this run. A particular problem, Mario?
Yeah, just from this morning, for some reason or other, I'm down more than a half-an inch in boost. So I was this far from aborting the run, you know, but I figure I'll get it in. But it's, you know, the car is definitely capable of doing a lot better than that by itself.
A half inch of boost translates to how many miles per hour here?
No, probably 1.5.
So we'll stand by and watch and see how Michael fares. At least you're in this show once again. Thank you, Mario.
Okay.
Mario Andretti, a little disappointed, to say the least, Paul.
And for the moment, we watch Eddie Cheever. His top speed thus far in the month at 221.8 miles an hour. We need to take that green flag. This is a Lola powered by a Chevrolet. It's a new race car, thus far unraced this season. And Eddie Cheever is on his 10-mile run.
Paul, often on the slowing down deal that we've been talking about, often after qualifying, the car slowed down a little bit, or excuse me, after practice in the morning. Practice comes in 2 different sessions. Often the track changes during that course of time. Every year we see the drivers complaining after they qualify, but all of the other drivers are studying what these drivers say so they can try to adjust their cars.
Here comes turn number 3 for Eddie Cheever.
Eddie Cheever working lap number 1.
You know, for a 500-mile race, where you qualify is not as important of itself as how you qualify compared to your expectations. And I think that's why Mario, who after all is alongside AJ in the front row at the moment, was so disappointed. Now, Eddie Cheever has not managed to get into the top 10, although you see his speeds there now. I think he has a chance of qualifying better right now than he expects to.
Miles an hour. 4:1.263. Eddie Cheever, 218.113 miles an hour. First time.
So that's Eddie's first lap at 218. He's down the front stretch at 221 miles an hour. That came off about 6 miles an hour in the turns to 216 on the back stretch, back up to 222.7 miles an hour.
The track obviously is slow for whatever reason, the weather probably. This makes A.J. Foyt's performance all the more remarkable.
You know, for example,
of A.J. Foyt ended up on the pole, Bobby.
Yes, that would make a lot of people happy. But, you know, as we listen to the speeds down the straightaways, 222 miles an hour, it just isn't good, Paul. It isn't fast. With a Chevrolet engine like Eddie has, he should be running 227 to 230.
Eddie Cheever is averaging 218.5 miles an hour. That would make him the 4th fastest qualifier if he continues on this run at that rate. I think, Bobby, what's making a difference is the fact the sun is shining down on this track, heating up its surface. Foyt's early run may have been a very, very bright idea.
Well, that's true, Paul, to a degree, but you know, it really isn't too bad yet. And look at the wind. There's almost no wind today. It's almost an ideal day on that. But you're right, the sun, if it hits the pavement, makes the tires a little slippery. I think we've got more of an engine problem so far.
.542.
Watching Eddie Cheever now.
Eddie Cheever coming
to the green
flag.
completing his final lap. He's averaging 2:18.5, still good for the 4th qualifying position.
No, he's waving it off.
They've decided not to take this qualifying run. Ken Anderson, the rest of his crew standing there, and they weren't happy with a 218.5 mile an hour run. I'm surprised.
I speculate that they would have taken that speed and that something may have gone wrong. Eddie may have felt something in that lap.
So as Eddie Cheever rolls to a stop, here's the way we have it thus far. And of course, this is subject to change. Bobby Rahal will be coming out next. But for the moment, it's A.J. Foyt on the pole with Mario alongside, then Jim Crawford. Danny Sullivan will be inside the 2nd row, and alongside him, Scott Goodyear. But as we suggested, Bobby Rahal will be coming out shortly, and there's a good lineup of competitors remaining. Maury Crane's one of the co-owners of Bobby Rahal's car on the Gallus Craco Racing team, as Bobby Rahal has just acknowledged the green flag, beginning the first of his 4 laps at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Off of 2.
Rahal in a Chevrolet-powered 1991 Lola. 1 race on this chassis. It finished 2nd at Phoenix.
Rahal, an expert on military history, was asked, so to speak, to lead the charge for Team Gallus. He has been the man in this team with Al Unser Jr., who's been really pushing all week to try to get the pole.
1 lap complete in this qualification.
So Bobby Rahal flashes across the line. And down into turn 1, his first lap speed at 221.5 miles an hour. That would put him on the outside of the front row if he can continue to maintain it. Let's go down to the pits, Gary Gerald.
Maury Cranes, of course, the car owner for Bobby Rahal. Satisfied with the first lap, Maury?
First lap is great. We have to improve a little bit. You know what A.J. Foyt did.
Your concerns?
Not really. Let's see what happens on his next lap. Let's see what happens then.
All right, we'll keep anxiously watching the clock. Maury Cranes, who, of course, along with Rick Gallus, has this potent Gallus Craco team, a 1-2 punch. Right now it's Rahal. Soon it'll be Al Unser Jr.
If there's such a thing as qualifying day metabolism, Rahal, who has never sat on the pole, has had that this week. He's been working up to this moment all week. Very extroverted behavior in the garages, riding his bike around, making jokes with people, laughing. And I think he's delivering the goods right now.
2 laps complete, and he's averaging 221.7 miles an hour. Down the front stretch at 225.5 miles an hour, and then he slows down. That's surprising on the backstretch by a 0.5 mile an hour.
It all has to do how fast you come off the turns, but you can watch Bobby's trying harder, Paul, because he's getting closer to the walls or using more racetrack. And he's getting a report by radio on what his speeds are.
Well, if Bobby Rahal continues keeping up this pace, he will qualify at the outside of the front row. A.J. Foyt still has the pole. Mario Andretti will sit alongside, and Bobby Rahal may be pushing his way into the front row. The record here for 1 lap is held by Emerson Fittipaldi from 1990 at 225.5 miles an hour. We haven't seen nearly that speed here today.
Now, just a reminder, this is a Lola Chevrolet by Bobby Rahal, Paul.
So Bobby Rahal, as the checkered flag comes out. 221.5 miles an hour to this point. Let's listen to the final lap average. Maury Cranes listens.
0.752 on the time. And the speed average 220.848 miles an hour.
220.848 miles an hour, the average speed. 221.4 miles an hour. That puts Bobby Rahal for the moment on the outside of the front row. Here's Jack Arute.
And I'm down here with a very disappointed driver of the Chip Ganassi Racing team, Eddie Cheever. Eddie, you thought you had a pretty good run going.
Not really. The car got a little bit loose coming into 4-1, so I might have made a mistake, but I want to have another run at it later.
The weather helped you make that decision, correct? Because there doesn't seem to be a problem for you getting into the back of the line.
No, I think we'll have more than enough time. Everything's going along well. I hope nothing else happens, but we've been running 220s consistently, and we made some changes this morning, and the car changed a little bit, and it might turn out to be a mistake. I hope not, but we'll see.
But Paul, the mindset has changed down here on pit road because of the good weather that we're experiencing. They think they can go nonstop till 6 o'clock, so a lot of guys are being a little more picky about their times.
Yeah, they certainly can take an opportunity to get back in line and try it later. 13 presentations, 6 qualified. And now, another installment in our continuing series on what's new in sports, science, and technology.
A look behind the scenes as sports and science converge, brought to you by AT&T. Qualifying for the Indianapolis 500 is a daunting task where this year, 88 cars are vying for only 33 spots in the race. But once a car has qualified, it undergoes an incredible transformation before it's ready for the race.
There's not many pieces on a race car that don't make it go. So you're really balancing yourself right on the edge of the car. That's why we spend a lot of time in Indy and really everywhere recording setup data very, very carefully. Ride heights to 10,000ths of an inch. Camber angles on the wheels to 1/100 of a degree, and the same on wing angles.
Using computer data recorded during practice runs, as well as the vast experience of the mechanics and drivers, the car is virtually completely overhauled to change it from a 4-lap qualifying rocket to a 500-mile endurance machine. Each mechanic has a detailed checklist of adjustments he will make to every part of the car in order to replace all of the used parts from qualifying with fresh new parts for the race. In the most dramatic change, the car's used engine is completely replaced with one with 0 miles on it. Another crucial adjustment involves changing the gearbox from qualifying standards to race ratios. These changes are designed to give the car and driver the best chance for victory. This sports science segment has been brought to you by AT&T.
At Indianapolis, the first day of time trials on the race course, another great racing name, Andretti. This is Jeff Andretti, Mario's youngest son. He passed his driver's test here last year, but he was bumped from the field with just 17 minutes to go on the final day of qualifying. Looking to qualify for his first Indianapolis 500.
Now, Paul, Jeff is driving a Cosworth engine. It's a new 91 Lola. And it's a Cosworth engine. As I look at his straightaway speeds, he's running 221, 222. Now that is really good for straightaway speeds for Cosworth. This is the engine that has dominated the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for so many years until the Chevrolet came along. So they have not been going that fast on straightaways for the most part in the Cosworths, but he's hooked up good today.
Well, Jeff Andretti is averaging 217.8 miles an hour with 3 laps in the record book. This is a car that the crew and Jeff nicknamed Lucille. And Lucille may just have put Jeff Andretti into the Indianapolis 500 at 217.632 miles an hour for the 4 laps. That's good enough for the outside of row 2. There's the Valvoline qualifying summary. The 4 laps and the average for Jeff Andretti. And Kevin Cogan now rolls out. This is a car powered by the Buick power plant. Gary Gerald was able to take a look at this new piece of power at Indianapolis.
The significant challenge that's being posed by the Buick-powered race cars this year at Indianapolis can partially be credited to a significant change that's been made in the Lola chassis. For the first time in 1991, Lola has made a half-dozen chassis specifically designed to accommodate the Buick power plant. Now, those changes are very subtle in the chassis, and from any outward appearances, this car, driven by Gary Bentonhausen, appears to be no different than a Lola chassis that may have a Chevrolet, a Judd, an Alfa Romeo, or a Cosworth engine. But there are a couple of significant changes this year. One of them relates to weight distribution, better balance to the race car. The second is an aerodynamic benefit, and the engineers tell us that this car, as opposed to the car of a year ago, creates about 4% more downforce. That translates at 225 miles per hour to additional 150 to 200 pounds of downforce. For the first time now, this chassis and this Buick engine becomes an integral part of the race car. It's not just tacked on, so to speak, with a lot of modifications as we've seen in years past. And now you consider those factors, plus the horsepower advantage that comes from 55 inches of boost for the stock block production engine versus 45 inches of boost for the purpose-built racing engines of Chevrolet, Judd, Cosworth. You can see why the Buicks have really made an impact thus far in the month of May at Indianapolis.
Kevin Cogan on the racetrack in what just may be a qualification attempt to run for the pole at Indianapolis. The current pole speed is A.J. Foyt's 222. .443 miles an hour. Kevin Cogan has practiced with this car at 226.677 miles an hour. He did that on Thursday. Foyt ran in the cool of the day. But, Bobby?
Boy, did you see him when he went out there, Paul? He was way out of the groove. Now he's pulling in, so obviously he's got some sort of problem. He came awful close to hitting the wall right there.
Coming to the end of a second lap in qualification, and Kevin Cogan rolls to a stop, waving off his qualification run. He was not satisfied. ABC Sports coverage of the Indianapolis 500 time trials will return after this message and a word from our ABC station. A most pleasant surprise. A.J. Foyt continues to occupy the pole position at 222.443 miles an hour. Mario Andretti would start alongside. Outside would be Bobby Rahal as we look through the rows here. And on the track is Tony Bettenhausen, ready to start his qualification run. But A.J. Foyt is a whale of a surprise, and he may have benefited, Bobby Unser, by the fact that he went out early in the day. The track's getting hot.
Often that happens, Paul, but he did a good run in spite. During practice, Foyt had been like up to 223, and so the 222 that he qualified at, considering everybody else's loss, I think is a heck of an achievement.
The surprise is that Kevin Cogan waved off a run in which he was substantially faster than Foyt.
Well, he was faster than Foyt, Paul, in the turns that Foyt was running. So it's a little strange, but we did watch Kevin jump clear out of the groove one time his car did. It looked like he was going to hit the wall. He might have felt that that was enough to cost him a chance.
And because we are now more than halfway through the line of those that drew for qualifying at the close of business here yesterday, there's a very good chance that adjustments can be made and they can get right back in the qualifying line and still make a qualification attempt before this day is out, and thereby still make it on the pole.
It's the mechanics' time to get out there and do their duties, figure out what's wrong, change the cars a little bit. And we have good weather we're looking at today, so they should be able to go all the way till 6.
The first lap at 215 miles an hour, but already he's slowing down. You can see he's over in the middle of the stretch. So another one waves off.
And that's a Chevrolet engine that Tony has. He's always had the Cosworth engines in the past, and Chevrolet let him get the engine. He's on their lease program now, so he's very disappointed in 215.
And there's little Al Unser Jr. as he pulls the helmet on. He's coming up in a few minutes. Michael Andretti is next in line, already strapped into the cockpit and prepared for his qualification attempt. Michael's seen his father run, wasn't particularly happy with the way the car was set up for his father. It put his father, though, alongside A.J. Foyt in the center of the front row, and Michael has climbed into his backup car, hoping to find some extra speed out of it when he finally rolls out on a qualification run. So we've seen some very surprising things here thus far. 16 presentations, 13 actual attempts, 1 contact with the wall when Randy Lewis got into the wall, but he's not injured. The car badly damaged. 7 cars thus far are qualified. That's 2 full rows and the inside of the 3rd row. The slowest qualifier to this point is Scott Goodyear at 216.7 miles an hour. And of course, A.J. Foyt at the moment sits on the pole.
In qualifying, the mental strain is largely self-imposed. You know, really, there's no reason to go out there and do anything less than the very best that you possibly can. The Andrettis are perfectionists. They put that pressure on themselves.
Young Michael Andretti, who next year is reputed to be going to Formula One, but this year it's Indianapolis. We asked him, can you possibly in any way describe the kind of sensation that a driver feels on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway down the straightaway at 225 miles an hour?
When you're doing 225 at Indy, you have a good handling car, and it's easy. You know, it really is considered. I mean, compared to the guy that's going 215, 216, who's really struggling, he's the one that's scaring himself to death. So, you know, I think it's a bit exaggerated. Indy is actually one of the easiest racetracks there is to race on if the car is right.
7 times he's taken the flag in the Indianapolis 500.
By the way, easy for him to say it's easy. Most other people find it very hard.
Michael Andretti, the backup car. Best finish here, third in 1986. Continues to warm up. Now, if you were going to run the 4 laps or 10 miles at different speeds, how long would it take you? Let's give some considerations. 55 miles an hour, take over 10 minutes. A little bit faster at 100, down to 6 minutes. 225. The qualification run is over in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Bobby Unser, that's flying.
That's fast. If you could go to the grocery store that fast or go to work that fast, it wouldn't take you very long. We'd have a lot more work time.
Makes you wonder, too, how fast can they ultimately go at Indianapolis? Have you ever hazarded a guess?
There is no limit to it, Paul. Many people ask me that question, and the answer is there is no limit because technology is what's doing it. These drivers are really not any better today than Barney Oldfield was a long time ago. It's just that they're up at the same time that the new cars are coming along.
Would you realize that it's safer now lapping at 225 than it was, say, 30 years ago at 160? Makes you realize you could go 300 here if you had the accompanying technology.
Especially, Sam, if we watch the accidents that we've watched today on this television.
Incredible, isn't it?
Michael Andretti's fastest days thus far during the practice. Twice he's led the Indianapolis 500 in 86 and 89. He fell out of the race while leading in 1989. This backup car is a Lola, and it is powered by a Chevrolet. But there is a problem being reported in the pits. Let's go to Jack Arute.
And the problem is with Rick Mears and his car. Now, that is the T car, the only one he's got. They had actually the valve, the pop-off valve on the car. About an hour ago, they discovered that they felt the valve was defected. They went to USAC and said, we want to replace that valve. USAC, however, didn't rule. Now, there's some question as to who's right and who's wrong here, but the end result is they have removed the pop-off valve off the car. It is going through inspection without another pop-off valve. They're going to insert it on the car, so it will be untried and untested. But here's the remark that Rick Mears made to Jack Beckley, Chief Technical Advisor for USAC. If there's something wrong with this valve, I'm coming back in.
USAC, of course, is the United States Auto Club, the sanctioning body here at the 500. That's Michael Andretti. He's one of his 2 car owners, Carl Haas, as Michael has completed 2 laps and is averaging 220.6 miles an hour. AJ's pole for the moment is still safe.
Consider the implications of that valve issue when you consider that it was Gary Bettenhausen who had come into the pits because of a problem with the valve fitted with no time to test it.
I'd be very surprised to see them take this run. You saw Carl Haas shaking his head.
I think, Paul, that everybody's generally having the same problems. I think it's, like you said a little bit earlier, the heat is getting to everybody. You can see Carl Haas is disappointed, but so is Michael. Michael's been running a lot faster than this all last week.
If he take the run, then it would be a possible 4th fastest qualifier today.
I'll tell you, A.J. Foyt is not disappointed by what's going on here.
You can watch Michael's groove as he goes around. He's really running a lot of it, way down to the grass and not using up as much racetrack as normal.
3rd lap at 221.1 miles an hour. And it looks like Michael is going to try to stay on it to complete the qualification run. His average speed to this point, 220.8 miles an hour.
The checkered flag is out for...
And Mario Andretti accepts the checkered flag from starter Dwayne Sweeney. Michael Andretti completing his qualification run. Carl Haas walks away, not happy with the performance of either one of his cars. Gary Gerald?
Well, we walk alongside Carl Haas. We got you from the backside, Carl. We saw you shake your head. You disappointed with this?
Well, a little bit, yeah. We were hoping we were going to go faster.
What accounts for this slowdown in speed? Is it all strictly conditions because of the weather?
Well, I don't really know. I haven't spoken to Michael yet. You know, he ran quite well this morning. We were really getting some good speeds, and might be the weather or the conditions have changed, the engine, and I don't know. I haven't spoken to him.
All right, thank you for your insight, Carl. Carl Haas, one of the car owners. Let's check in now with Jack Arute.
Well, we're here with Rick Mears, who's having a quick conference with one of his crew members, and as soon as he's done with that, we're going to try and get a word with him. First of all, Rick, you've been sitting and you've been watching all of this, but now we discover that your car does not have the pop-off valve on it. You're going to make a replacement, or you're going to run the one you had in practice? What's the story here?
Oh, no, there really isn't anything. They wanted to take a look at it, or whatever the case is, and they just checked it and make sure everything was right. They put it on their machine, everything's good, so it puts it back on the car and going. I don't know, they waited too late to pick it up in line or something. I don't know what the foul-up was. I just came out.
But it's tough. You got to have that in the back of your head, especially when you realize that Gary Bettenhausen has already had a major valve problem. He was off by 4 inches of boost.
Well, you know, the day's different, and we've run into that before. It is quite a bit different. Last year, I dropped quite a bit between now and qualifying, or between Thursday or day before and qualifying. And it can happen with this, and I think that's catching a lot of people out. So we just got to wait and see.
The first time ever in your driving career you crashed a car here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway yesterday. You went down for a quick checkup, you came back here and you turned a terrific lap. But this morning, how are you feeling?
Oh, we're fine. Really, I mean, the bruised foot, and if it wasn't for the bruised foot, I wouldn't even know what had happened. Everything else is just, you know, great.
Paul?
Rick Mears still smiling after that confrontation with the wall yesterday. A huge crowd here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first day of time trials. And on the track, none other than the defending PPG champion Al Unser Jr., but he is pulling back into the pit area. Did not take a flag, and so Al Unser Jr. is going to pull back in. What do you think, Bobby?
Well, Paul, you got to remember, they just put a new engine in that car, so that could be if they have a problem, they just want to bring it down and check it.
Let's go to Jack.
Paul, that was pre-planned. They blew an engine in practice this morning. They replaced the engine, and again, they're thinking the conventional wisdom is that they can go until 6 o'clock tonight. They wanted to take that opportunity just simply to shake the engine down. They'll get in the back of the line, and they'll present it for qualifying.
And so the car is not actually presented. It's been presented, but it hasn't made a qualifying attempt, so it has 3 other opportunities to qualify. Al Unser Jr. out and then back in. Let's go to Gary.
We talked to you before the run while your dad was out there. There was disappointment, and you kind of had a feeling that it might not be the number you wanted. The result now and your reaction.
Well, I think you could see it. I was pretty much right on. Actually, I was even slower than I thought I'd be. It's a very disappointing day.
All right, the sentiments and the thoughts of Michael Andretti as we go back to our colleague Paul Page upstairs.
So qualifications continue underway. Scott Brayton rolls out onto the racetrack, but A.J. Foyt, for the moment, sits on the pole. Will he be able to continue to hang on? Michael Andretti inside the second row as the first day of time trials continues.
Birmingham needs to fire up its offense to stay in the playoff hunt. They travel to Frankfurt to tackle the Galaxy in the World League tomorrow on ABC Sports.
Well, it's Scott Brayton who is warming up now for his qualification attempt in 1985. He held the one-lap record here at 214.199 miles an hour. He waved that one off in a New York minute here. Scott Brayton completes lap number 1 of his qualification attempt at 209.2 miles an hour, but 209, he's been a lot faster than that. He's not going to accept this one.
His engine doesn't sound good, Paul, and I look at his speeds, and it kind of goes along with his engine. It wouldn't surprise me for him to find out he's got a cylinder not working good.
You know, there's so many contradictions, Bobby Unser. On one hand, they'll tell you with all the computerized equipment on the cars and the ability for them to project the future with those computers, you'd think that everything would go quickly, but it seems that they're always wrong. Let's go down to Gary Gerald.
Well, Paul, Bobby Unser was right on it with the sound. You could hear it plainly down here on pit road, and we were near the crew, and the crew was hollering as he completed the first lap. Come on, baby, clean out, clean out. They wanted that engine to clean up, and at 209, obviously, it wasn't doing it. So now they're chasing, running to find out what the specific problem was.
Well, we've come a long way from the first Indianapolis 500 in 1911 to today.
Sometimes, Paul, the spark plugs get fouled when they sit there and warm them up before they go out for qualifications, and maybe that's what happened to Scott Brayton. At any rate, he definitely wasn't running good.
Well, Rick Mears sits. His crew chief, Richard Buck, has a final conversation with him as the crowd anticipates the possibility that A.J. Foyt will be bumped off the pole. And at the same time, Rick Mears may set an unprecedented number of pole positions. Rick Mears is coming up, and Al Unser Jr. will be back in the line. Emerson Fittipaldi is there. We'll be back.
He's the hottest driver in the world. Two-time defending champ Ayrton Senna will try to win his 3rd straight Grand Prix of Monaco. Tomorrow on ABC Sports.
Rick Mears begins warming up. The last time that A.J. Foyt sat on the pole for an IndyCar race was at Pocono in 1981, 10 years ago. At the moment, he's on the pole. This man could take it away from him. He knows Indianapolis better than any other driver. and is totally adept at qualifying here. Yesterday in an accident, but now back out in the backup car. We asked him, when you're going around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, when do you know you finally hit your limit?
Well, you test it. You know, you've been here a week, so, you know, hopefully you know where the limits are by then. And you test the waters a little bit from time to time throughout the week prior to that. And then when the time comes, you always reach down and pull out a little bit more. But you have to know how much you can pull out and get away with it. And that's just seat of the pants. And it's basically trial and error throughout the week that you learn where those limits are.
5 times more than any other man, Rick Mears has sat on the pole, trying now to give his car owner, Roger Penske, his 10th Indianapolis 500 pole.
You know, Paul, I think for oval tracks, without doubt that Rick has got to be the best qualifier that there is. In the race, he's probably the most cunning that there is.
Bobby, you speak of the best qualifier. Of course, he's had the pole 3 out of the last 5 years, but this running so different than those others. The others came at the end of a long week of confidence building, of trial and testing. Of course, yesterday he had this huge crash at about the middle of the afternoon, and he has not really done very many laps in this backup car. And the question of what exactly went wrong and threw him into the wall, you see his wife Chris there, and I know they must have thought a lot about this last night. That has not been resolved, and yet right now he must gather it all together to make this run.
Rick Mears down the backstretch on his first lap at 226.8 miles an hour.
Now remember, Paul, 226 is fast.
And it's over 223 miles an hour.
223.447 miles an hour. If he can maintain that pace, then he will take the pole away from A.J. Foyt. Rick Mears on the front stretch at 227.8 miles an hour. Through the first turn down to 221.4. Off the second turn at 220.4 miles an hour.
Same pattern as before.
Whatever doubts he may have had about the machine or about the valve or many other problems that they have had in the last 24 hours, he's put all that behind him. He is concentrating 100% on this.
From yesterday afternoon's devastation.
Still faster, over 224 miles an hour.
223.8 miles an hour is the average. The second lap up to 224.2 miles an hour. There's the 2-lap summary for Rick Mears.
Pretty much the same.
So Rick Mears is in the process of trying to take the pole away from A.J. Foyt. Foyt qualified at 222.4.
He really has a good line, Paul. He's getting into the turns real wide, cutting down real close. Look how wide he is getting in. And the guy cuts right down the white line in turn 1, right out really close to the wall.
0.117 on the turn speed, 224.344.
The average speed to this point, 224.003. That's the average of the 3 laps. The last lap for Rick Mears at 224.3 miles an hour down the backstretch. 227 miles an hour down to 221 for the turns. He scrubs off a bit more and then picks the speed up as he comes onto the front stretch, completing a qualification run. And Rick Mears' run is complete. The final lap. You heard Tom Carnegie's announcement, 224.444 miles an hour for the final lap. His average, 224.113 miles an hour. It's good enough for the pole as you take a look at that Valvoline qualifying summary, but it's not good enough to break Emerson Fittipaldi's 4-lap record at 225.301 miles an hour. But who's coming out? None other than the lap record and the 4-lap qualifying record holder himself, Emerson Fittipaldi. So A.J. Foyt moves to the center of the front row. Rick Mears, for the moment at least, has an unprecedented 6th pole. The 10th pole for Roger Penske. Mario Andretti moves to the outside of the front row as 9 cars are now qualified And the crowd applauds Rick Mears' arrival at the conclusion of his qualifying run. And Roger Penske comes back to talk with Emerson Fittipaldi. No doubt on the cool-down lap, Bobby Unser, Rick Mears has radioed some information to Roger that he might be able to use to help Emo.
That's one of the advantages of a team effort. They don't lie to each other. They try to help each other out. And another thing about Fittipaldi, he's come a long ways. He's one of the best oval track drivers I think I've seen in many years.
Well, Fittipaldi has had the fastest time of the month so far. A shade faster than Rick. You see him there. But is he the great qualifier that Rick Mears is? We will soon find out.
Well, Fittipaldi, there's Jack Arute standing right there. Fittipaldi pulls his helmet off. Jack?
Let's get Emerson right here and find out. You came out of the car. What's wrong?
Well, I think it's too hot now. I try to go later.
Was that after a debriefing? I saw Roger
yes,
came by and he's made the call?
Yeah.
Some cat and mouse here.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
Of course, despite the fact that he pulls out of the qualifying line, Bobby Unser, as long as he qualifies today before 6 o'clock, he still can sit on the pole. In past years, that qualifying lineup has only given the opportunity for somebody to go should there be rain. But it's not a long qualifying order that we're looking at, so Fittipaldi no doubt will have a chance to get out a little bit later.
Consider the emotions
I'll tell you
here.
what, Penske is a gambler. Penske goes for things like this. He thinks things out. He'll absolutely gamble. It's his money, it's his team, and he told Emma.
And consider Emerson's emotions. It's like a man on a high diving board. He comes, he gets ready to make the dive, and then someone taps him on the shoulder and says, later.
Well, he's smiling, Emerson Fittipaldi, as we take a look at the starting field. It will be Rick Mears on the pole. He's doing the interview now for the giant public address system here. It'll be Rick Mears and A.J. Foyt and Mario Andretti. That makes up the front row. In the second row for the Indianapolis 500, Bobby Rahal, Michael Andretti, and Jim Crawford. And the third row will consist of Danny Sullivan, Jeff Andretti, and Scott Goodyear. Those are the 9 that have qualified to this moment. But, of course, anything could change. The day is not nearly over yet.
Now, something else that might happen. They've seen Emma pull out all the other teams, all the other drivers. This is going to psycho them an awful lot. They're going to start thinking about this. It could mean, Paul, that not too far from now, after a couple more guys try it, that the track will shut down for qualifying, go back to practice. They'll wait for the day to get cooler and then come back out. So let's see what the other guys think.
Let's go down to Jack Arute.
Well, you see the discussion continuing here, gentlemen, on pit road. Emerson Fittipaldi and Rick Reiderman, and they're talking it over. One of the things that's happened is it's 93 degrees outside here. And let's go to Rick Mears right now with Gary Gerald.
And indeed, as he acknowledges the plaudits of the crowd, this has got to be a big burden after what you went through less than 24 hours ago, now lifted from your shoulders.
Well, it is, to a point. I mean, you know, we're in the show here, and, you know, we had a fairly decent run, and, you know, we'll see if it'll hold up or not. You know, nobody knows, but we're tickled. The guys did a tremendous job with the car.
Your teammate Fittipaldi is now elected to wait until conditions are better. You have to sweat it out a bit.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's obviously this isn't the ideal conditions. Maybe we should have waited also, but I just wanted to go ahead and get out there and run and get it over with and get it in the show and get going. We've had enough excitement for this week.
All right, the sentiments of the man known as the Rocket at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Paul?
Rick Mears, for the moment, enjoys the limelight of the pole. Now, we'll be back again tomorrow. Plenty of action left to go today, but tomorrow also we'll be here with reports on the time trials. 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central and Pacific. Well, it's hot out there at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Rick Mears has the pole for the moment, but Emerson Fittipaldi, Al Unser Jr., Arie Luyendyk, John Andretti are all waiting to qualify, and all are very, very capable. We'll be back with more. ABC Sports coverage of the 500 time trials will continue after this message and a word from our ABC station. Well, it's been a fast and furious afternoon thus far before this giant crowd as the temperatures continue to rise here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A look at the Tower Terrace section, and let's take a look there at the thermometer up into the 90s. Bobby Unser, that means that the tires aren't adhering well and that the engine isn't carbureting well.
It just kills the engines, Paul, and of course it hurts the tires, but the sun, like you mentioned earlier, getting on the pavement hurts the tires. The heat that you see on that thermometer, boy, that's the engine.
Let's go down to the pits now. Here's Jack Arute.
Well, let's try and finish our conversation with Emerson Fittipaldi. Emerson, you can tell us firsthand what the high temperatures, the ambient temperatures, can do to a race car.
Well, I think first thing you lose some power on the straight. The engine doesn't work as good on a cold day. And second, the downforce and the grip goes away, and you just be scrapping speed around the corners and they slow down.
Now, you all have been watching the sun here, and the clouds continue to dip in and out. But you guys, because there is no threat of rain, have determined that you may go much later in the day. Is that correct?
Well, that's what Roger is planning to do. I agree with Roger. I mean, I was ready to go, and Roger come running from Rick after Rick's beautiful run, and they say, well, Emerson should try late afternoon. Some of our good competitors are back in line, and I think we should make the same move.
Now, you've been over 226 miles per hour, though. Could that have precipitated the decision by Roger Penske to maybe gamble with your run now that he's got one car in pole potential?
I think Roger feels more comfortable doing that after Rick's strong, solid run. I mean, Rick had a beautiful run, and I think Roger said, well, have the Emerson try later.
So it puts the burden on you now.
Well, it's good. I can have some more sleep now and come back stronger later.
That's what people don't realize. You know what this guy does until about 5 minutes before he's supposed to get in the race car? Where do you go? What do you do?
Well, I try to relax, and you know, Jack's very difficult. So much pressure in Indianapolis to qualify. And I think sleep is a good way for me to relax, and now I can have a quick nap before coming back again.
Let's check in with Gary Gerould right now for another story.
Well, this was a great story a year ago, of course. Arie Luyendyk won this Indianapolis 500. You were in position, ready to go up for a qualifying attempt, made a decision, however, to go back into this pooling area. You've broken the line. Why was that decision made?
Well, it's still quite early in the day, so we've got a couple of hours left, and it's just a little bit too hot for us right now. We feel we can run better with some cloud cover, so we're just waiting for that. It might not come, but we feel it will come.
Have you had an opportunity to run under these type of conditions at any time this week thus far?
It hasn't been this hot this week, so it could be a surprise to us too also what the car does. So we don't want to be surprised, and we want to take a chance on waiting a little bit and getting some cloud cover, and then just running under the conditions that we've done most of the week.
Tough on the nerves at all?
No, we got time.
That's a defending champion talking down here, Paul Page.
Well, Gary Gerould, it's not only Arie Luyendyk that's pulled out of the line. Scott Pruitt has pulled out, and we just saw the Terrell Pomroth car come out of the line. What's happened there?
Well, we don't know specifically what happened, but we understood there was a problem in tech when the inspection that they make at the head of the qualifying line, something to do with one of the clearances on the race car. So the car did not pass its initial technical examination. You were talking with Terrell, Arie. Did you get any indication as to what the problem was on the clearance?
No, I didn't know. He was talking to me about something different. I didn't know about his problem.
Okay, that's as much as we can tell you at this particular point for Terrell Pomroth.
Thank you, Gary Gerould. Of course, we're preparing for the 75th running of the Indianapolis 500. The first one run 80 years ago here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The track itself has changed very little since then. Let's go back to Jack Arute.
Another man that's hoping that they'll get some more cloud cover so that he can make a good stab for pole position here is Kevin Kogan. You've been awfully quick this year.
Well, you know, this morning we were second fastest, but I think we were off by 1/10 of a mile an hour off of Emerson, and, you know, Emerson just came out of line, too. I think everybody, I went out thinking that maybe I had a shot at having enough grip, but the track is just too slippery. I went into turn 1 and 2 and was flat out, and went into turn 3 and went right out of into the gray area, so I decided I'm going to give it a shot later.
Now, you've had the opportunity, unlike many drivers, to drive a Chevrolet, drive a Cosworth, and now to drive one of these Buicks. Can you discern any major differences between those three power plants?
No, it's the Buick is a good motor. I think it's competitive with the Chevy, and I mean, it has a real shot at pole today. That's why I pulled off.
Now, we know the story behind Gary Bettenhausen's wave off, of course, the problem with the pop-off valve. Does that give you any cause for concern?
No, that was totally different than my situation. I just, you know, the car, we're so close to pole position that it's kind of dumb to not give it a shot.
Paul?
Well, Kevin Kogan, certainly one of those names that you can add to the list of the possibility of sitting on the pole before this day is over. A.J. Foyt had it first. Rick Mears has it at the moment. Now, they've changed these cars substantially since the first race 80 years ago, and our Jack Arute takes a look at the evolution of the Indianapolis car.
Innovation has been part of the 500 since Ray Haroon won the first race in 1911 in a car that carried only one man.
I figured I could save weight and get more speed by riding alone. The job of the mechanic in those days was to watch behind and notify the driver when other cars were trying to pass. They claimed that it'd be dangerous for me to ride alone, so I rigged up this little gadget.
This, Mr. Reed, is the first rear vision mirror.
That rear vision mirror and the interest that it sparked has come to symbolize the creativity that would become part of the Indianapolis 500 for the next 75 races. By the 30s, the cars were specially built for Indy. Aerodynamics had yet to become part of the Indy vocabulary, but teams had their tricks. Some teams applied talcum powder to their cars, thinking it would make them slicker and quicker. In '61, a successful rear-engine car was introduced, allowing cars to go faster in the corners and focusing attention upon the potential for more speed. Within 2 years, the tires also changed, widening steadily to give the cars better grip. By the late 1960s, the search for cornering force and speed led to spoilers. And eventually, full wings were fitted both to the front and rear of each car. With the wings and tire changes, speed surged, 25 miles per hour in just 2 years. In the 1980s, designers reconfigured the bottom of the car to create suction between the car and the road. Speeds jumped again to 220 miles per hour. How about the car of tomorrow? Sam Posey had this idea. Instead of sitting, the driver is lying head first, lowering the profile of the car a full 30%. He steers with a stick like a fighter pilot. But how does he see? A periscope looks back and front, and the data appears as a heads-up display upon his visor. What do present-day designers and drivers think of Sam's vision of tomorrow?
Well, I think you probably have a problem getting a driver to do that. But from a car point of view, that'd be just fine. You know, from an engineering point of view, that'd be just fine.
Aerodynamically, it's definitely a solution to get less drag. But I don't know about controlling the vehicle. It could be quite difficult.
I think what you will see in the future is smaller cars, but I seriously doubt that the driver's head will be the first thing that goes into a wall and there's a mistake.
If this was the way we're going, I'm glad I'm getting near the end of my career.
Well, my concept is based on the law of physics that says that the faster you go, the more wind resistance matters. Aerodynamic drag increases as the square of the speed. I reduced the frontal area of the car by 30%. At today's speeds, this means about 25 miles an hour speed increase, top speed. This car would go 265 miles an hour and lap at about 250. And I think Eddie Cheever would drive it, frankly, if he knew it could carry him to victory here at Indianapolis.
I don't think you have a chance in the world of getting anybody to drive that car. Eddie Cheever now enjoys the warmth of the Indiana afternoon sun, and Gary Gerald is right there.
Eddie, you were out there initially. Now you're back, ready to give it another shot. The problem's the first time around, and your thoughts now as you get ready for the second.
Well, when I ran, the track was a bit greasy, and I wasn't doing that good at times. I was only doing the high 18s, and I've been doing 20s all month, and I thought it was best to wave off. But now we're right back at 9 again, and it seems to have gotten hotter and greasier still, so I'm right back to square one. I kind of wish I just continued and not stopped, but I'll play cookie crumbles, I guess.
Who makes the decision to go now or to wait later in the day? Is that you or is that the team?
No, it's a group decision, obviously, that's made. But when I'm out on the circuit, I have to make it whether I come in. It was my decision to come in on the first time.
All right, we wish you well this time out. Eddie Cheever contemplating his thoughts. He wishes to be cool rather than well, Paul.
Well, here's the way they line up for the moment with 9 qualified. The front row, Mears, Foyt, Mario Andretti, and the second row, Bobby Rahal, Michael Andretti, Jim Crawford. Danny Sullivan will start on the inside of the third row. And then Jeff Andretti and Scott Goodyear. Those 9 have qualified. There have been 20 presentations at the line and 16 actual attempts, but still to qualify. Take a look at some of these names. Will Rick Mears continue to hold on to the pole? Don't forget Kevin Kogan is in this list as well. There he is. We'll be back with more from Indianapolis.
The Indianapolis 500 Time Trials. Brought to you by Chevy Trucks. More people are winning with the heartbeat of America. And by the big taste of Miller Genuine Draft Light. Big draft taste comes to light.
Well, it seems that time trials at Indianapolis always hold some surprises, and today is no exception at all. course, they've been rained out the first day the past 2 years, so we're just happy that there's a sun shining down on the track, but it's creating some real problems for the many teams here. We've seen a number of cars already pull out of the line. Already history's been made with A.J. Foyt for the moment on the pole, and then Rick Mears bumping him alongside, and for the moment Rick is on the pole, and that would be a 6th Indianapolis pole for Rick. But Bobby Unser, when you think about this situation, the temperatures are rising. Everybody's got to gamble a little bit, but it could still be hot at the closing gun at 6 o'clock.
Well, they have to gamble, Paul, but let's keep one thing in mind now. They've not had any hot days yet this month. This is the first one. And so they're all thinking, will the clouds come over? And as we look at the sky, we can tell they're not going to. So that means only one thing. Between 5 and 6 o'clock this afternoon, when you normally have happy hour, is about the only time that it may cool off a little bit. And boy, it's going to get crowded about right then.
Happy hour, of course, is that time of day when the temperatures come down and the speeds go up. The weatherman, by the way, said temperatures may be in the high 70s, so he's missed the setup as well. Partly cloudy skies at the moment. Sam Posey, men who are in line, who have prepared the entire week to focus on that one moment and then suddenly pulled out of line. How does that affect the psyche?
Well, first of all, they know that this is a decision they must make, because the formula for the effect of heat on horsepower is that for every 3 degrees of ambient temperature rise, you lose 1% of your horsepower. Now, these cars have about 700 plus horsepower, so at stake here is 20 horsepower. If you're Emerson Fittipaldi, sure, emotionally you wanted to run now because you've waited all week, you peaked at this exact moment. But if Roger Penske comes along and says, let's wait and you'll have 20 more horsepower, you say to yourself, that's a deal I'll take. The trouble is that the internal metabolism of the drivers is thrown off by that delay. Whether that affects them on the track or not has a lot to do with racers' nerves.
Well, the track itself is in good shape in terms, no debris, no problems like that. The clouds float overhead. That's probably the worst possible condition because some turns are shaded and some are very, very hot. The big story, of course, starting the day was A.J. Foyt, the very first out, and for a long time held the pole position. A.J. Foyt with 4 Indianapolis 500-mile race wins. He is one of those many men that have contributed to the legends of the Indianapolis 500. When the gates opened for the 1961 Golden Anniversary 500-mile race, a most unusual creation rolled down the pit road. At the wheel was Australian driver Jack Brabham, and the engine was located in the rear. It was designed by John Cooper. The Cooper Climax was a radical piece of machinery. He would start inside the 5th row. The pole sitter Eddie Sachs and Jim Hurtubise would race wheel to wheel into the first turn. Hurtubise would gain the upper hand and lead for the first 35 laps. At the 125-mile mark, Eddie Sachs would lead for 6 laps, but then had to make a pit stop. The Dean Van Line's crew went to work, servicing his car in a fast 26 seconds. No power wrenches or high-volume fuel here. Nor was there the precision of the modern-day 12-second pit stop. The magnificent roadsters of this era, with the drivers sitting bolt upright behind the front engine, are still considered to be some of the most beautiful and exciting cars ever to race at the Speedway. Moments after Sachs exited the pits, a spectacular pileup occurred on the home stretch. Rookie Don Davis looped his car as a line of speeding machines approached. Davis ran to safety as a chaotic chain of events unfolded. A.J. Shepard swerved, got crossed up in front of Bill Cheeseburg. Roger McCluskey became involved. And then Jack Turner struck the outside wall and tumbled down the bricks. In a matter of seconds, the front stretch was littered with wrecked cars. Miraculously, there were no serious injuries. When the green flag flew once again, Sachs, who had never finished a 500 in 4 previous tries, forged back to the front as his wife Charlene kept a watchful eye. Into the pits for the final scheduled stop. Sachs gives young A.J. Foyt the lead. But Foyt, also a 4-year veteran, had yet to make a pit stop, and the crowd felt that the race would go to Eddie Sachs. Finally, the sleek number 12 was fully fueled and ready to go. A.J. Foyt made his final pit stop with 110 miles left in the run. The stop would consume more time than Foyt or his Bignati Bowes team would want. The car was just out of reach of the refueler's hose and had to be pushed back in order to get fuel into the giant fuel tank. It would cost A.J. Foyt precious seconds as Eddie Sachs closed on the racetrack. With Bignati's help, finally they were able to get fuel into the tank and Foyt sped away. Then Eddie Sachs hustled past A.J. Foyt as a terrific duel for first place develops. In the pits, they could only watch, George Bignati keeping track of A.J. Foyt's screaming roadster. Finally, Eddie Sachs breezed into the lead. And then, while virtually in the shadow of the checkered flag, he came into the pits, his right rear tire wearing thin. Foyt raced to the lead with 3 laps to go as Speedway President Tony Holman saluted the brand new champion. A.J. Foyt would wheel his car into the cherished confines of Victory Lane for the first time, winning the 1961 500-mile race. It was his first win on pavement. Later, it would be discovered that Eddie Sachs had plenty of tires to finish the 500. Foyt would go on to win 4 times. Eddie Sachs would never score a 500 victory. A.J. Foyt's image on the Borg-Warner Trophy, the symbol of victory at the Indianapolis 500. He is the only man to win in both a front and rear engine car at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and of course 4 Indianapolis 500 wins. Let's go down to the pits in Jack Root as we continue to watch the Penske team.
And we have caught up with the man that made the decision to pull his driver, Emerson Fittipaldi, out of the line, and that was Roger Penske. Roger, you had to sprint up from the photo area.
Well, I really wasn't quite sure. I wanted to talk to Rick, and then I asked what Londike had done. They said he had pulled, and I saw Al Unser had pulled. So, you know, we've had cars that could run competitively for the pole. Rick was in with a 224. I was going to flag him if he was under that. So basically the decision was, let's have a car that at least can compete with the 2 Buicks and the 2 or 3 other cars we think that can beat us.
Are you a little bit obsessed by the Buicks, by their competitiveness? Do you feel the pressure to reestablish the superiority of the Chevrolet?
Well, not really. They've done an excellent job this year. I think they've got a car that's fitted to the engine. Kogan, you know, is no slouch going around this racetrack, and Gary Bettenhausen also. Certainly Londike, you've got to consider him as a potential pole winner also. So to me, it was a strategy that we decided we would do. I'm not concerned about what engine they have. We want to see the Chevy win, obviously, but today we're worrying about our team.
Well, anybody that wonders if Roger Penske doesn't call the shots, just watch what's happening today.
Well, they're gamblers at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway today, and Chip Ganassi with his driver Eddie Cheever has decided, let's not wait any longer. We think the temperature will remain high throughout the afternoon. So Cheever is now suiting up and preparing for a qualification attempt. Now, don't forget, coming up next, ABC's Pro Bowlers Tour. The high rollers take aim at the $125,000 Fresno Open. And then later today at 4:30, 3:30 Central, ABC's Wide World of Sports presents former world and Olympic champions as they go for the gold at the World Professional Gymnastic Championships. Plus, the American Championship Racing Series continues with the Pimlico Special. And of course, we will have live reports right to the end of the first day of time trials at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So Eddie Cheever climbs in the car. He will attempt to qualify, and we'll be back to watch that run. Well, the crowd waits at Indianapolis, as do we, while Eddie Cheever straps into the cockpit and makes his preparations to roll out on a qualification run. They're taking a gamble. It's very hot here today, but apparently they feel it's going to be hot throughout the afternoon. Now, some of the laws of physics that they fight here at the Speedway include drag. Jack Root has a report.
Over the last decade, automakers have concentrated so much on aerodynamics that the average drag coefficient for the American passenger car is now posted at only 0.3. Now, one would think that an Indy car would be far more efficient in terms of aerodynamics than its passenger car cousin, but that's not the case. The drag coefficient for a 1991 Indy car is 5 times greater than that of the passenger car. Now, here's one of the major reasons why. The frontal area on the passenger car is much wider and broader than the Indy car. What that allows the air to do is travel quicker and easier over the top, under the bottom, and along the sides as the car slices through the air on the highway. The IndyCar, on the other hand, with a reduced frontal area, finds the wind traveling along its sides, hitting up against the wide slicks that are used in racing, and traveling through the long tunnels that are necessary for ground effects in IndyCar racing. Why do we need ground effects? You've got to keep the cars planted firmly on the pavement when you're hurtling around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at over 225 miles per hour. So consider this fact the next time you strap yourself in your passenger car. You are more aerodynamically efficient than Bobby Rahal.
Remarkable fact, but at the same time, Bobby Unser, that IndyCar is sticking to the ground a whole lot better.
It certainly is, Paul, and he hit the thing. The tires are where the big drag is. If they could put fenders on the car, they would really be slipstream good.
Eddie Cheever, Chip Ganassi's car. Now warming up, looking for a qualification run.
As of yesterday afternoon, more than 7,000 laps have been turned in practice this month as Eddie Cheever takes the green.
He begins his 10-mile run. Eddie Cheever looks down into turn one. This is a 1991 Lola. It's never been raced, powered by a Chevrolet.
Now let's look at his line. He went way low, real close to the wall. In that turn, he's got a good line down the back straightaway now. Comes down a little bit, Paul, which is normal. There's Eddie Cheever. He's not been here an awful long time. He's a very good race driver.
Fastest speed so far this month, you saw it there. 221 miles an hour. Down the front stretch at 222.1, fell off to 213 in turn two, so his average is going to be somewhat below that.
I'm sorry, Paul.
This gamble may not have paid off, Bobby.
Well, you saw as it came out of the turn, the car went towards the wall just a little bit.
It is almost 218 miles an hour.
And then
a little bit slower than his first
just as
attempt.
soon as he got near the wall, he had to whip it back a little bit. Now that hurts straightaway speed, Paul.
217.817 miles an hour, Eddie Cheever's first lap. Already, he's almost complete with his second lap at the Speedway. Down the front stretch at 222.1, the back stretch at 222, but he fell off in the turns to 214 miles an hour.
Now we can look at his run as opposed to Rick Mears' run. This is a Lola car, brand new Lola, whereas Rick had a Penske. You can see they both, look how close he gets the wall. It's very similar to Rick Mears' run. Down about the same place in turn, watch out here. Very close, he looks identical to Rick Mears.
The second lap at 217.723 miles an hour. He's averaging 217.7.
Eddie is fluent in Italian and French as well as English.
Let's go down to the pit. Here's Jack Arute.
And Chip Ganassi is controlling the yellow wave-off flag this time around. Chip, are you going to make this one stick?
I don't know, Jack. We're sitting here. I'll time him when he comes by. We'll see how he's doing. We got one more lap. We'll take it from there.
Well, this is the process right now. As Ganassi goes by.
Faster, 218.2. I think we're probably going to take it.
Well, the Ganassi team's doing well, so he says he's going to take it for Eddie Cheever.
Early in the day, Cheever's 2 laps that he ran and then waved off were at 218 miles an hour. His last lap at 218.2 miles an hour, and his average 217.9 miles an hour for Eddie Cheever, last year's Rookie of the Year here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He started 14th, finished 8th.
Kind of ironic, Chip Ganassi was a race driver, to the people that don't know. He used to be out here and have people making these decisions for him. Now he's making them for his team.
And the checkered flag flies for Eddie Cheever, who has now completed a qualification attempt and is qualified for the Indianapolis 500. He becomes the 10th qualifier in doing so. The Valvoline qualifying summary. It's the 4th lap at 218.7 miles an hour for a 4-lap 10-mile average. 218.122 miles an hour. So Eddie Cheever has completed his qualification run. ABC Sports coverage of the Indianapolis 500 time trials will return after this message and a word from our ABC station.
GTE will award each front row starter $10,000.
Still fairly quiet at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The crowd and the drivers wait for the temperatures to cool just a bit. Still, it has certainly been a most exciting afternoon. Al Unser Jr. at the moment is taking a look at climbing into the car to go out and practice to see if it is cooled enough for him to qualify. Earlier in the day, it was a very, very quick day, though not record-breaking speeds. Rick Mears was the pole sitter after A.J. Foyt. Mears was out in the first hour of the practice. A.J. Foyt had the early pole, and Mears was able to qualify at 224.113 miles an hour. The only incident of the day, well, that was Randy Lewis. He was the second driver to go out to attempt to qualify, and as he headed down into the first turn, the right rear of the car dropped down, sending Randy into a slide and slamming the car up into the wall. Well, the car was very seriously damaged. Fortunately, Randy Lewis was not injured, climbed out of the car, and is taking a look at being able to qualify another vehicle here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now then, there's also the question of Mark Dismore, who was injured in an accident here at the Speedway yesterday. He is at Methodist Hospital of Indianapolis. They've just released another report on him. He is awake. He is alert after surgery. He's in the recovery room, and they say that Mark Dismore of Greenfield, Indiana, is in good condition. So that is most certainly a welcome report here, and it received a lot of applause here by the crowd at the Speedway. Now let's go down to the pits. Here's Jack Arute.
And Paul, one of the men that still thinks he can sit on the pole is with us, Gary Bettenhausen. And Gary, you went out, checked the track, and said it was a little loose. Now what are you going to do?
Well, that's really all we did. You know, when it started to rain, my chief mechanic shoved the car in the line just in case we'd get a heavy downpour, and then it quit. So we had to go take a lap, and all we're doing is checking out the racetrack.
Paul?
We'll keep track of the action here throughout the afternoon on ABC's Wide World of Sports. Now, let's send you back to Frank Gifford in New York. Well, Frank, here's a live look down the back straightaway at Indianapolis, where it has been raining for some time off and on. And to give you a comparison, while it was raining on the back stretch, over on the front stretch, Roger Penske was talking on his two-way radio and in a sunshiny area of the pits. But we've been treated to nature's fireworks as lightning strikes have hit all across the grounds. The rain cutting right across the fourth turn, and Emerson Fittipaldi may have gambled and lost. There seems to be little chance that he will get out and make his run for the pole today. That comes after waving off an attempt earlier. Here's the way the front row shapes up. It'll no doubt stay this way. Rick Mears, A.J. Foyt, and Mario Andretti. There is little chance anyone will qualify for the pole yet today. Well, the track is now open for practice for the first time today since qualifications began. We'll be back with more from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway right after these messages. Thank you, Chris, for the moment. The track is quiet. Mike Groff went out and took a couple of laps. I think everybody watching to see how his car would fare on this now very hot racing surface. But for the moment, while practice is available and anyone that would want to could go out, no one is elected to head out onto the 2.5 miles of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You want to race an Indianapolis car? Well, it takes some courage, certainly determination, and without question, a very large pocketbook. Gary Gerould takes a look at the cost of racing an IndyCar.
It's no secret that to be competitive in today's IndyCar racing requires a tremendous amount of money. Just consider some of the following figures. Today's going rate for a 1991 chassis is $305,000 plus a conversion kit for either speedway or road racing use at $28,500. That's $250,000. And since you need a car for road courses and super speedways, as well as a test or backup car, that's a total of 3 cars or $1 million. Engines are close to $100,000 each. And over a 17-race season with 3 cars, figure on needing 11 power plants for a total of $1.1 million. Add another $500,000 for 25 rebuilds during the season at an average of $20,000 each. Tires cost about $900 a set. And at Indianapolis, you'll need 20 sets, 7 sets at other races. Figure $120,000 for tire costs, plus another $50,000 if you have 15 days of testing over the year. Wheels cost $2,000 each, or $8,000 a set. Count on spending about $100,000 per year just for wheels. Spare parts are another huge cost, roughly $750,000. And spare transmissions, suspension parts, radiators, intercoolers, wings, etc. In fact, a single rear wing costs $19,000. To carry your cars and equipment, you'll need a big rig transporter. That'll set you back about $320,000. Salaries for crew members, including engineers and an aerodynamics expert, will take another $1.4 million. An optional luxury is a hospitality center. It will take roughly $475,000, plus another $250,000 to staff and operate over the season. Add it all up, and the bottom line for a competitive one-driver team is right at the $6 million mark. And the frightening thing is, we haven't even touched on the driver's salary, travel costs, timing systems, PR representatives, a variety of other items, and already that total is double what it was just 6 years ago. It's no wonder that sponsors are an absolute must.
And there's no question that these are the thoroughbreds of motorsport. Well, there's Mike Groff, Antonio Ferrari's car, practicing. This is not a qualification run. The track is open for practice and will remain so until a car presents itself for qualification. But racing will continue all weekend here on ABC. Tomorrow at 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central and Pacific. It's the 1991 undefeated Formula One driver Ayrton Senna going for his 4th straight victory and his 3rd consecutive Grand Prix title at Monte Carlo. We'll have coverage as well as continuing coverage throughout this afternoon and tomorrow of the time trials at Indianapolis. Let's go to Jack Arute.
And Paul, the man, it's the defending champion of the Indianapolis 500, is with us. Ari Luyendyk, a little bit different team this year. You pulled your car out of the line because it was warm. What's the brain trust now saying? Do you think you're going to wait as late? We hear as 5, maybe 5:30.
Well, it depends. If we have a cloud cover here pretty soon, then we might just pull it out in line and make an attempt. But right now, we're just waiting for the weather to improve. It's really warm. It's really sticky, and you lose a lot of grip, you lose a lot of downforce. So it's really just a waiting game right now.
You've been over 225 miles per hour. Now, how fast, if you get the right conditions, do you think you can go today?
I think I could put together 2 laps of close to 225, 4 laps of close to 225.
Confident about maybe going for the pole position?
Well, that's why we pulled it out of line.
Paul?
All right, Luyendyk, last year's winner of the 500. We continue the celebration of 75 races at Indianapolis. The very first race 80 years ago, the 1911 Indianapolis 500, as we continue to look at legends of the Speedway. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway, built in 1909, hosted a variety of events in its formative years. Balloon and motorcycle races were held before the Speedway conducted a 500-mile race in 1911. Thousands of spectators filed through the gates. They came to watch what might happen when 40 of the fastest cars in the nation faced one another. They started 5 abreast, with 500 miles separating each driver from a place in the history books. Johnny Aitken went into the record as the man to lead the very first lap in the 500-mile race. All but one of the cars had riding mechanics on board to warn the driver of approaching vehicles or to assist with trackside repairs. Ray Haroon, driving the only single-seater, made fewer pit stops because his car was lighter by the weight of a riding mechanic. Just before the halfway point, Joe Jaggersberger's car snapped a wheel, and his riding mechanic, C.L. Anderson, was thrown to the track. Harry Knight swerved to miss Anderson and crashed into the pits, hitting Herbert Little's idle car. The impact turned Little's car over. Knight's automobile landed on all 4 wheels, but it tossed its riders 20 feet. In all, 7 cars were eliminated in wrecks. The 500-mile grind continued on for a grueling 6 hours and 42 minutes. Alone at the wheel, Ray Haroon rode under the checkered flag to win at an average speed of 74.5 miles an hour. Haroon had come out of retirement to race the first 500 and never raced again at Indianapolis. There's been a lot of history since Ray Haroon won here, but this challenge remains the same, 2.5 miles around Indianapolis. The fastest thus far this year officially, Rick Mears. On the pole, A.J. Foyt, the center of the front row, and Mario Andretti outside. But remember, this is provisional. 13 cars have qualified. The second row, well, it looks this way. Bobby Rahal, then Michael Andretti and Jim Crawford. The third row, on the inside, it's Danny Sullivan, Eddie Cheever, and Jeff Andretti. Eddie Cheever, by the way, Well, that run was right about where he would have qualified if he'd gone out earlier. And then in the 4th row, the lone car of Scott Goodyear. These are the 13 that have qualified for the moment. But there's still plenty of time and plenty of opportunity to not only qualify, but to sit the car on the pole. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway closes at 6 o'clock this evening, Indianapolis time. Up until that time, any car running faster than Rick Mears will be the pole sitter. Can it be done? Well, that seems to be the fact that is open to question. Here are some men that are certainly capable of getting it done. The temperatures on the track will make the difference. We'll be back with more.
Former world and Olympic champions meet in the first ever Pro Gymnastics Championships, plus the Pimlico Special. It's all live today on ABC's Wide World of Sports.
The hottest day of the year thus far in Indianapolis. Temperatures in the 90s. And the kids are enjoying the fountain in front of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum. Some really excellent machines on display inside that building. And fast machines on the line at the track. That's John Andretti's cars. They're making some final preparations to get it ready to go qualifying at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We, of course, will remain here throughout the afternoon and tomorrow. And should someone go out to qualify, should things change, we'll be right back with you. It has been thus far a most unusual, but certainly an exciting day with A.J. Foyt starting off the runs and sitting on the pole. That was really a remarkable moment, especially considering he was coming back after a crash last fall. Here was A.J. Foyt's run. Streaked around this track, the very first guy out, and qualified at 222.443 miles an hour. When the qualification was done, A.J. talked to us.
A.J., you said before the crash that the car had more in it.
Well, it really does. I think it's a good race setup what we had, and it's just a little bit tight, and I had the crew to raise the gear right before qualifying, and probably, you know, the heat come up pretty quick, but all in all, the cars performed well, and I just didn't do the job probably I should have, because...
Yeah, but you got the job done pretty darn well. It's a solid one, but it seems like it's a lot of things are hitting you. How's the physical side? You said you were nauseated this morning.
Well, I took some vitamin pills on an empty stomach. I knew better, but it was just, it's nothing big.
It's something big. You look pretty upset. It's a getting to you, isn't it?
No, not really.
Paul, I think his eyes tell you differently.
That was get all your point earlier. For a moment, he had the pole, finally taken away by Rick Mears. And A.J. sits in the center of the front row. And then this was Randy Lewis, the second man out. He brushed the wall, and then something broke at the right rear of his car, sending Lewis crashing against the first turn wall. Fortunately, the car did its job. Randy Lewis also was fairly skillful in keeping it down away from the wall. He was not injured. And then it was Rick Mears that came out. As he was cheered across the line, accepting the green flag, he was certainly one of the men that could break A.J. Foyt's grasp on the pole, and Rick got the job done. He qualified at an average of 224 miles an hour. 224.113 miles an hour. For the moment, it's Rick Mears on the pole.
9 out of the last 10 years here, we've seen new track records set during qualifying. Unless someone can 1.2 miles an hour faster than what you see Rick Mears has done at 224.1, we will not have a new track record today.
So we look through the field as it's lined up at the moment, but remember that this is provisional, and we'll continue to keep track of all of the action at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway throughout the afternoon. Bobby, some people are going to have to take a whale of a gamble.
They are, Paul. It's hot. You can't do anything about it. They'll gamble the last hour, and that's what we'll see then.
So for the moment, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is open for practice. The safety crews are out checking to make sure the surface is prepared should anyone want to go out for a qualification run. At the moment, nobody wants to give it a try. We'll continue to watch and wait. This is Paul Page at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Stay with us throughout the afternoon.